that's so exciting, and it's so amazingly attractive.
Yeah, you're not laughing now, are you?
Oh, well, they're not laughing now, are they? Look at that, right in the middle of the screen. What a terrible mistake. Now I've pulled it out of the holder. It only happens when you've got the Charlatron on. Notice the new and Lingwood cravat, please. A little bit of respect for the doctor. Oh, yeah, just before the stream, because Dr. Jeffrey Schaler's already here. I can see him down there. But when I was preparing the stream and putting the light on, combing my hair, I was entertaining Jeffrey with loads of very funny jokes. I was muttering away, and I said, "Oh, Jeff, I've just realised you can probably hear me." And it's all right. It's called pre-stream muttering disorder. If you mutter for more than 1 minute twice a year, you can get your serotonin uptake inhibited. And I was thinking, oh, this is great. I'm scoring points with a legendary figure in the, I'm going to say, anti-psychiatry movement. Jeff might question that. And then I realised I was on mute, and all my great, hilarious, witty banter, I was just talking to myself, which is also in the DSM. So, I've still got a diagnosis there somewhere. Young Jeffrey was very, very eager for me to show you this photo of him. Now, a lot of people don't know, but Dr. Jeffrey Schaler is 5 centuries old. He's been doing this now for 500 years. Look at that. Look. Let me get a full screen on that. Oh, my boat race affecting it. Look at that. This is what you do, people, you see. When you challenge common ways of thinking, when you have critical abilities, you also get the secret of eternal youth. I mean, look at him. Look at him. Good Lord. Right, I'm going to read you a little bit about Dr. Jeffrey Schaler. He's been on the channel twice before, so a lot of you will know him. Someone said to me the other day, I've had a little look at this Jeffrey Schaler bloke. He doesn't seem very qualified. And you couldn't have got it further from the truth, which is interesting. But it made me think, how do you get qualified when you oppose something? Can you get like a certificate? Like if you're a chef, can you get a certificate in critical analysis of cooking? If you're opposed to a practice or a discipline, how do you qualify for opposing it? Because you're opposing the doxa, you're opposing the sort of the orthodoxy. And they love giving out certificates for the orthodoxy because everyone they give out is a little bit more currency. It's like a currency. It's what they call it, quantitative easing. The more BAs and MAs and PhDs they give out for the orthodoxy of psychiatry, there's more currency to spend and people trust it. Fiat currencies are trusted, but you can't really give out the opposite, no money. I suppose it's like inflation, but I have dragged this metaphor as far as it's going to go now. So let me give you a little bit of Jeff's bio. Dr. Jeffrey A. Schaler, he's also a professor, by the way, and he likes to be called he likes to step down to the doctor. But Dr. Jeffrey Schaler, a psychologist in the United States, has been in private practice as an existential psychoanalyst since 1975. He is now retired as a professor for many years at American University in Washington, D.C., where he taught 14 different courses on psychology, psychiatry, and the law. We touched on this before about the insanity defense, obviously, and there's something else I want to talk to Jeff about that, where you can go to court for something, and out of the blue, the prosecution bring a psychiatrist in, and the psychiatrist says, "No, your client's mental." And you're like, "Hey, what?" So anyway, we'll get on to that. So there is a crossover here with law. He is also a retired professor at Johns Hopkins University, where he taught courses on psychology, addiction, and mental illness for many years. of course, I first encountered Jeffrey Schaler with his groundbreaking book, Addiction is a Choice. So he also taught on addiction, mental illness for many years. He has taught psychology and the ideas of Thomas Saz. Thomas Saz is Jeffrey's mentor. This is the man that sort of broke the psychiatric egg and sort of started all this hoo-ha, and thankfully he did. He has taught psychology and the ideas of Thomas Saz and their practical application to law and public policy to thousands of university and college students at 5 different academic institutions. Dr. Schaler is an internationally recognized as an expert on the work of his late friend and colleague Thomas Saz. He is the author and editor of 10 books, or editor of 10 books. His last, entitled Thomas Saz, The Man and His Ideas, published by Routledge in 2017, which he edited with his friend. He was editor-in-chief of Current Psychology, an international quarterly peer-reviewed journal, for 9 years. Schaler is the only person in the world to receive 2 awards in the name of Thomas Saz for outstanding contributions to the cause of civil liberties. A frequent guest on television debates, Chris Dangerfield's YouTube channel. He is very much in demand on radio and TV, dealing with the myth of mental illness, involuntary commitment, and the insanity defense. He owns and produces Saz.com, which is SZASZ.com. I'll say it again, SZASZ.com, which you can go and look at. You can also contact him there. You can contact him at Schaler.net. You can see Schaler in the name of this video. This is his 3rd appearance on this show. He got cancer and survived. He got leukemia a few years back and survived it. Remarkable. And another thing, just quickly, when Jeff Schaler wrote Addiction is a Choice, of course, all the junkies, of which I obviously, most of you know, I've got almost an opiate connoisseur. A lot of addicts and that were like, you don't know what it's like. How can you say it's a choice? You don't want to know what it's like. But for back problems, he was actually prescribed methadone. And I'll tell you now, a methadone withdrawal is worse, far worse. I mean, it's hard to say how do you judge it, but it's far worse than a heroin withdrawal. And I can't remember, I'm sure Jeffrey will correct me if I'm wrong. I think he was on something like 100 milligrams a day, which is a lot of methadone. Really, any junkie can get by on 40 mil a day. But he ended up on some huge amount of methadone, decided, it helped with his back, but it kind of zombifies you. There's a lot of side effects with methadone. And so Jeffrey decided he had enough, talked to his doctor, tapered it down at home, no rehab, none of that nonsense, no God will set you free, and got off it. He got off methadone. And when I said to him, it's horrible, isn't it? He went, a little bit uncomfortable for a couple of weeks. It's incredible. So without further ado, and even if you don't respect this man's ideas, what a treat for us that he comes on this channel, because I'm sure he's got plenty of better things to do. So I'll tell you what, here he is. Jeffrey!
Hi, Chris. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm really nervous, and I think my subscribers can see.
Well, maybe you ought to take a drug of some sort,
Well, I tried that. I've had about 6 different ones today, but the last 3 were caffeine, and not great. Not great.
That'll do it. Yeah, right.
People, entropy at the top, super chats at the bottom. If you want to put a question to Jeff Schaler, super chats will be, I don't know what the word is. They will definitely get asked, because that's how the grift works. But we want some, we were talking about this the other day, and a lot of people had a lot of things to ask Jeff, and a lot of people don't buy it. And what I find interesting is, I know that nearly all of my viewers believe that the recent pandemic was dubious, to say the least. I mean, I'm not even allowed to talk about that on people got it, but blah blah blah. And yet when you say mental illness is dubious, people are all up in arms. You know, my brother's got this, my cousin's got this, I've got this, and it blows my mind the way critical thinking can suddenly be thrown out.
Right.
I think, is it because mental illness brings up a lot of feelings in people? Because essentially it's a feelings-based kind of discourse, isn't it? You know, I will let you say something, by the way, Jeff. But in one of the questions at the beginning, before we started, someone said something about when people come back from, oh, it's gone now. But someone said something about, oh, I can't find it. What a terrible shame. But, well, from the top, do mental illnesses exist?
Are you asking me now?
Yes.
No, they exist only in a metaphorical sense. Only in a metaphorical sense. For example, we talk about spring fever, but that's not a real fever. It just refers to a feeling that people have at this time of year, which generally is characterized by a sense of positive happiness at the renewal of life. But that's not a real disease. And another example would be an alcoholic drink called a screwdriver. Well, you don't drink a literal screwdriver, but it's a word that's applied to a particular drink. So I think the first thing we have to pay attention to is the difference between a metaphor and something that is literal. Now, literal disease has a very specific meaning. It refers to a cellular abnormality, something biological, a cellular abnormality. Behavior, which is what people are referring to when they talk about mental illness, and usually some kind of unacceptable behavior, refers to how a person conducts himself or herself. In other words, what do you choose to do? All behavior is volitional. It's all choice. There's no such thing as a involuntary behavior. Now, why does this, you mentioned, and we'll get into all these things, I'm sure, much more deeply, but you mentioned, what is it that upsets people so much when we challenge the idea of mental illness? It's not that we're denying the fact that people exhibit peculiar behaviors. It's that the idea of mental illness is used to undermine responsibility.
Yeah.
And if you say, my mental illness made me do it, then you're not responsible. Was Hitler mentally ill? No, he was an evil person. He found satisfaction in causing death, destruction, and horrible pain in people. Now, a lot of people are talking about our past president, and I hope he remains past, Donald Trump.
Let's not get too political, Jeff, or we're gonna have two different arguments on the go here.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that. But the thing is that people diagnose him. They diagnose him for a particular purpose as a way of criticizing him. But that's not a real disease. If we say that this person that we don't like has a disease and that's what's making him behave the way he is, then we're saying basically he's not responsible.
Yeah,
and
I saw. You know that people talk about things like anxiety. You know, I suffer from anxiety.
Right.
Or I've heard someone say just recently, because I've been talking to people about this stream, someone said to me, yeah, but I've got anxiety. And I said, listen to the language. What have you got anxiety, or are you anxious?
There you
because
go.
To say you've got it, you know,
Right.
that you're anxious. So there's choices you've made in your life, of the results of those choices have left you anxious. And
Right.
she said, yeah, but I can't cope, and you know, I want the doctor to prescribe me some drugs. And I said, but that's not isn't you being anxious your body, your life experience telling you to maybe make some different choices so you might not be anxious? If you're happy, have you got happiness? Oh no, I've got happiness. You wouldn't say that, would you? You'll say, oh, I'm happy. But so and it's I feel people do it with depression. I've got depression.
Right.
You may be just not depressed because you've made bad life choices.
Well, we have to differentiate between the explanation for this alleged mental illness or odd behavior and the description of it. A lot of people confuse the two. For example, someone says, well, what is schizophrenia? And people who believe in mental illness say, oh, it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. But that's not what we mean by schizophrenia generally. That is an explanation for why people do certain weird things, right? And usually those are socially unacceptable things. For example, what we call schizophrenia is usually characterized by hallucinations or self-reported imaginings. If I imagine that there are pink elephants walking upside down on the ceiling in my room, someone may diagnose me as schizophrenic. But you see, that's considered a socially unacceptable hallucination. If I claim that Jesus has entered my heart, well, that's a hallucination too. It's just that's a socially acceptable one.
If there were 50 people in a room hallucinating elephants on the ceiling,
yes,
and 49 of them were having that and one wasn't,
right?
Who's got the problem there? The one who's not hallucinating them, or the one who isn't?
Exactly, and that's how we define deviance generally. That if you're the odd man out, then you're deviant. There's something wrong with you. But that doesn't mean there's something physiologically wrong, right? Yeah.
Or does it mean there's anything wrong with you? I mean,
exactly.
I've just remembered what the early chat was. People were talking about anxiety, people coming back from war and PTSD or whatever, and treating people. And if you follow that to its logical conclusion, you have to set at least a window of what we call normal. And that means treating everyone to become almost identical. That's the logical conclusion of psychiatry as far as I can see it.
It's a homogenization, making everybody the same. And I think in a free society, we value diversity.
Is that terrifying, Jeff, that there's a very well-respected medical practice, very well-funded, taxpayer-funded, called psychiatry, whose aim is to normalize the human experience, standardize it?
Yes. And my colleagues and I have talked for quite a while about what we can best do to destroy psychiatry. And what we've decided is we've got to get psychiatry out of the court. It's the courts and the laws that give psychiatry the power to do things to people that they may not want to have done to them. And that comes under the realm of what we call involuntary commitment. Now, many of us would say, well, if you want to believe that you have a mental illness, by all means, you're free to do that. It's just like this whole thing about transgender. You know, if you want to believe that you're a gender, which is a psychological experience, opposite from your biological sex, that's perfectly fine. Nobody should interfere with that person.
Crack on.
That does not change the person's biological sex. And unfortunately, there are many people that believe that it does. And that is an error in thinking.
Yeah, again, it's bizarre. Thank you everyone for the super chats. Hello, Alan. Sorry I missed your super chat the other day when you said you had to run. Thank you, JD. Thank you everyone who put JS in the chat. That was for you, Jeff. A little sign of respect when people do that. So Anglo-Saxon says, and he's a good lad, Anglo, but he says this, Jeff, it's a little bit personal, Anglo.
It's okay. It's fine.
took me 2 streams until I called Dr. Schaler Jeff. Jeff, my brother's been sectioned many times. So he faked his symptoms, and the shrinks he saw misdiagnosed him. It's a bit, you understand the question there?
Yes, I do. He's talking about malingering. Malingering is when someone...
No, he's not. No, I know what malingering is. No, sorry. It's weirdly written. What he's saying is, that's what I thought when I first read it. His brother's been sectioned. He has been sectioned.
What do you mean by sectioned? That's a term that I'm not familiar with.
Sorry, in England, that means you get psyched off. They send you to a mental home and you don't get a choice. You don't get a choice. Sorry. And what he's saying is, are you suggesting that his brother faked his symptoms and the therapists misdiagnosed him? I think what you're saying is, because he's been sent to mental hospital,
right?
If you're saying mental illness doesn't exist, how did he end up in a mental home?
Well, because he exhibited behaviors that a psychiatrist or someone who had the power to section him found unacceptable. That's the whole thing, and that's what we object to. Now, did that person want to go to a hospital or to get, quote, treatment? Which is not real treatment. It's basically getting, hopefully they're not using electroshock therapy anymore, but in some places in the world they still are. The United States, for example. But is he given drugs to change the way he feels? I don't know. My concern is this something that the person wants? Is this what his brother wants? Now, there are many, if we're going to say that a psychiatrist is diagnosing a disease, it's always going to be problematic, because the way we diagnose real disease, Chris, and your friend, I've forgotten his first name, but the way we diagnose is through what are called signs. For example, first we have symptoms where I say, I feel down, I feel anxious, I feel scared, whatever. Or if I say, I feel a pain in my chest, right? Well, that pain in my chest could come from anything. They have to do certain tests to find out what the real cause of that pain in his chest is. And those tests refer or reveal signs. Now, symptoms, when I say I have a pain in my chest or in my stomach, are highly changeable. In other words, it could be due to anything. When you look, you have to look at the signs. Like if your doctor says to you, well, Chris, I think that you have an ulcer in your stomach and we better open you up right away. The first thing you're going to say is, hold off, doctor. I'd like to see some tests. I'd like to see some signs that I really have that problem, right? Well, in psychiatry, there are no tests.
Right. So this is the next meta question I want to establish at the beginning. Are there biological markers for mental illnesses?
No.
That's what I've been saying. That's what I've been saying, but people won't buy it. Not everyone, but they go, there are. Every article I have read, and it's been about 50 over the last 6 months, they're all could, should, might, probably, possibly, hopefully. No one's found them. They want to, because good Lord, psychiatry really needs them because it's being attacked. But I've not seen it. They've got the golden chalice of schizophrenia where they go, surely they're mentally ill, but there's still no biological markers for it. There isn't, and you'll stand by that.
Absolutely, Chris. Absolutely. I mean, let's look at it another way. If you look in a standard textbook on disease, mental illnesses are not listed there. There are no mental illnesses in a textbook on disease. Another way you can look at this, Chris, is all real diseases are in a cadaver at an autopsy. Yeah. You can't find depression. You can't find hallucination. You can't find, addiction. You may find the consequences of using too many drugs, too much alcohol, and those are physiological, but you can't find the behavior, because behavior, Chris, is characterized by a living person, not by a dead person.
Sorry. I read one about depression. No, sorry, I interrupted you. I read one about depression. They were talking about biological markers after death. But this bloke had depression for like 20 years. He wasn't eating properly. He never went out. He barely drank any liquids. And his body wasn't within the window of normality. Right. But that wasn't because he was depressed. It was because of the way he lived due to the choices he made. They weren't biological markers for depression because they don't match up with someone else who's got depression.
Well, there you go. Right. Another way of looking at this, Chris, and one other thing is that we have diseases. We are depressed. We are scared. We have diabetes. We have cancer. But we don't do cancer. We don't define ourselves by the cancer. We define ourselves by feeling a particular way. I feel happy. I feel sad. I feel scared. I feel angry. They don't
need treating. They need that's my girlfriend. Sorry. Those feelings don't need treating.
Right.
They need experiencing. That's life.
Exactly. That's right. I mean, these are not problems to be solved. They're experiences to be lived.
I saw one in the DSM-5 the other day. I'll probably get it wrong now, but it's something like social oppositional disorder.
Right.
Something like that. And for people who don't know how the DSM works, there's a few check boxes, and it will say under each, they just put disorder at the end of normal behavior, right? Most of them. And then it says something like the prisoner, sorry, the client will exhibit 2 of the following features in a 3-month period. Right. And the social oppositional disorder was things like has problems with authority.
There you go.
I mean, come on, I think you have more problems if you didn't have problems with authority.
Thank you. Exactly. Well, there's another word.
Thanks you for your answer, Jeff. He said thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want me to say something?
Yeah, sure. Go.
Well, there's another word that the editor-in-chief of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders has used to describe the DSM. And you know what it is? Bullshit. Bullshit.
I saw him.
He was quoted in Wired magazine, and I debated him on Cato Unbound. Very nice guy, Alan Francis. He'll be the first person to say, this is a bunch of bullshit. These aren't real diseases. But he was very careful to say, these do often refer to problems in living. And that's what Thomas Szasz was very careful to say. These can be considered problems in living, which are completely different from real diseases.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm just keeping the missus happy.
All right.
So I don't have to talk to her. I told her I was streaming with a mentor, but there you go. This is interesting because Alan here, a good friend of mine from the stream. Now, I will tell you now that Jeff's is gonna not say stop that. But It's an interesting question that I get when I talk to people about the myth of mental illness. Well, I've been on Prozac, or I've been on, what was that other one, Seraphim. I've been on this for 30 years. Right. Should I stop? You're saying it doesn't exist, so should I stop taking it? So I don't know how to approach that when people say it to me. I usually say no.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because it can be dangerous to stop any of those drugs suddenly. So I would caution you against doing that. The drug does not cure any disease. It changes the way you feel, and that may be something that you like. But think for a moment, a person has a drink in the evening, he feels better from a glass of wine or gin and tonic or whatever. Does he feel better because he's suffering from gin deficiency? No. Drugs have an effect on a person's body, but What I'm saying is that if you've been on any of these, what they're called SSRIs,
Yeah.
if you stop it suddenly, you could have some physical problems. And I would be careful about that. So if you want to stop, talk to your doctor about weaning yourself off so that you don't go into kind of a shock physiologically. That's what I'd be
Yeah.
concerned about.
Coming off of SSRIs, I've seen a few people do it
Right.
without tapering, and it didn't look good. Head shocks, all sorts of things. But
Right.
Alan, I think in the context of this conversation, it would be, you obviously were having some kind of feelings that you weren't comfortable with, that were
Right.
getting in the way of your life. And so you went to a doctor for help. Now, personally, I don't know what Jeffrey would think about this, but personally, and I have done this, I'd go to a psychotherapist, because that is if we go back to the original, what it was originally called, it's a talking cure, where they talk to you about your life. What are you doing? Why are you doing? Oh, you do that, do you?
Yes. Yes.
Is that making you happy? And they find, they build a picture of your life. Through what you say. A good therapist, you pay them $150 an hour and they barely say a word. That's a good therapist, because you do the talking. You find out why you're feeling like this. Whereas the psychiatric response is to give you, in this example, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, and you just don't feel those feelings, but you carry on doing those things that make you unhappy.
Well, the psychiatrists have painted themselves into a bit of a corner, at least in the United States, because they're the ones who kept arguing this has a physiological basis, a neurological basis. And finally, the insurance company said, okay, then we're not going to pay you for talk therapy. We're only going to pay you to prescribe drugs. And they don't want to do that.
Whoa. Again, from the top again?
The psychiatrists have long said the reason you're depressed or you have schizophrenia or whatever is because of some neurological problem, right?
Why did they do that from the outset? Because they could have just not done that and said,
well, it was because they were taught that, because they thought there was more power in that. They thought it was mysterious, and a lot of doctors enjoy the mystique. Nobody can understand what they're saying. And so that they can exhibit more power over people. But here's the point. They get paid through insurance companies, and the insurance companies are always looking at a way to that's my pup, looking at a way to reduce costs. So the insurance companies in the US said, okay, you say that it's physiological, then we're not going to pay you for talk therapy. We're only going to pay you for giving drugs. And the psychiatrists don't like that, because it's very boring to just give drugs to people one after another. They want to talk and find out what the person's like. And so maybe that has something to do with the high suicide rates among psychiatrists. You see?
I didn't know about that.
Oh, yeah, very high, especially among female psychiatrists. But the thing is that many psychiatrists who have made the investment in their career don't want to let go and change, because they will then have to admit that the cost and the money was a big mistake. And you're going to find very few psychiatrists who admit they made a mistake and will just sit down and work on a talk therapy.
It's a terrible shame, because you'd think someone who went and done their BA, their MA, their PhD, whatever, would have a real passion for the subject, and to suddenly have that moment of clarity where you think, this is bullshit. That would be what you want, because that's the moment where your life becomes meaningful. You're not just peddling out the same old, which is what Thomas has done, which is what you done.
Exactly.
But I think I can understand for a lot of people, which makes me feel a little bit gross, knowing that people are going to see psychiatrists. The psychiatrists know it's a nonsense. They know it's likely going to do more damage in the long term. But they've got mortgage to pay. They've got kids to get through school. And then 3 years later, I didn't know about that high suicide
Oh,
rate.
yeah. You see, Tom Zoss and his close colleagues, myself included, do not get paid by insurance companies. We get paid out of pocket. And other psychiatrists and psychologists say, well, I can't earn a living just doing out of pocket payment. And I say, then get an additional job. You see?
Yeah.
And that's why I became a professor in some ways, because I didn't want to just depend on my quote clients in therapy. And you see what happens for a lot of therapists, psychiatrists, et cetera, is that they have an investment in keeping the person in therapy. Because if they cure them too quickly, they lose money. So you always got to follow. You've always got to follow the money trail here. You know.
Yeah. Right. Ian Marr says, and I'll clean it up a little bit. I know what he's saying. He says, "Am I correct?" Now, Ian. First of all, these are different disciplines. Psychotherapy isn't psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis isn't psychology. Psychology is like an umbrella term for the disciplines of human behavior and activity. So when you say it's a psychology grift, no, it's a psychiatry grift.
Right.
That's the discipline under scrutiny here.
Yeah.
So when you say Jeff isn't denying there are bonkers people we encounter,
Correct.
Jeff, are there bonkers people? Are there mad people?
Of course there are. There are quite a few. That's not the issue. That's why at the start, Chris, I said we're not denying that people exhibit crazy behaviors. Crazy meaning I don't know why they do it. It seems peculiar to me, seems self-destructive, seems odd, abnormal, whatever. I think they have a right to do that as long as they don't hurt someone else in the process.
Likewise.
But that is not the same thing as a disease. Let's just look very briefly, Chris, at a perfect example. Up until 1973, people who had a homosexual orientation were said to be sick.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. In 1973, thanks to the work of Thomas Zoss, who said a behavior cannot be a disease, the American Psychiatric Association said, I think we ought to declassify homosexuality as a disease. Now, was that
the same? Sorry, go on.
Well,
no.
Is that because they discovered something scientifically that it wasn't a disease? No, the declassification was a political process, Chris, which was exactly the same way it became a disease. It was a political process because people didn't like gay people. So they said they were sick.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's the same. Drug addicts are now in that situation.
Right.
What, 30, 40 years ago, a drug addict was a criminal.
Right.
Well, now they're sick.
Yes.
I mean, when will they just be people who choose to use drugs? When that, and likewise, it will be a cultural, political thing.
Right. You've got it.
You know, I've sat in rehab centers and I've had people telling me I've got a disease, and it's just like, I haven't, no, and you're not helping me. And I think I told you the story before. A young bloke said he sucker punched his grandmother so he could steal her rings to buy drugs. And the therapist said the kid said, I carry a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. And the therapist, who was meant to be treating him in group therapy, said, that's the disease of addiction, Jamie. That's what and I said to her, I said in group, I said, hang on a minute. It's people like you telling him bullshit like that that's going to keep him doing things like that, because he's got that guilt has just disappeared. You've just let him off the hook. Right. You said he's got a disease. No, he's an horrible bastard, and he just punched an old woman for 20 quid. You know, tell him that, and he might. That's when I read your book, because I'd been to about 9 rehab centers by then, and it's very hard to get treatment when you're in an environment where you don't believe the treatment they're offering you.
Right.
You know, you walk in there and when you're doing your I don't know what they call it. They don't just let you go in. You have to do a few weeks where you go up every week. And what is addiction? It's when you can't stop doing something. Well, how are you going to help me then?
Right.
Well, we're going to make it so you stop doing it. Yeah, but you just defined it as something you can't stop doing.
Exactly. I mean, this is how therapists drive people crazy. It's like what George Orwell said, called a double speak.
Yeah.
You know, you're saying that you have to quit, but you can't quit.
Yeah.
Now,
but you
what
can pay
disease?
me 20,000.
What? Sorry, I missed it.
You can pay me 20,000, and I'll resolve that contradiction
That's
for
right.
you.
That's right. Name one disease that you could quit simply by making a decision.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
Well, all of the ones in the DSM, perhaps. Where are we going? Addiction.
Well, one other thing, Chris, and that is, what is the primary symptom that is said to be characteristic of mental illness? It's denying the existence of mental illness.
There you go.
If you say, that's why in the addiction treatment world, denial is focused on so much.
Yeah.
Because that's said to be characteristic of the quote disease. If you disagree with me, then you're sick. Same thing is true for all mental illnesses, or what psychiatrists call mental illnesses. If you say that I'm not schizophrenic, they'll say, well, that's a characteristic of your disease.
Yeah, and I had
these
20
people,
years.
To me, these people ought to be thrown in jail. These damn psychiatrists ought to be thrown in prison. They're a bunch of quacks.
Yeah,
they're crooks. Yeah. They're crooks. That's what Tom used to call them, crooks.
Yeah, and I think this sort of language should be used.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have had to have gone to 20 if from the outset they said to me, "You're choosing to use drugs. You've got problems, son.
Yes,
You've obviously got problems because you're self-medicating, and you're getting your body's in bits, and you're 25 years old. You know you don't own anything. You haven't got a job, so you've got problems."
Yes.
But that wasn't what I was told. I was told I got a disease, and every time I got back on it, Mum, it's not me. I've got a disease. Give us 20 quid. Or my disease is. I actually told my mum if she didn't give me £20, I would stab someone to get it. And I said, I don't want to, but that's what the disease of addiction does. And because you have to have family groups, they give the family all this spiel. They fill them up on it all. And so the family doesn't allow the client to take responsibility. They think that they're free of agency. A couple of questions. Thank you, Ian, for that one. Jared says, what does Mr. Schaler believe is the best way? See, Jared, this is where I get confused. Sorry, Jeff, for not finishing it.
Go ahead.
But the kind of language used here, Jared, it's so sort of vague and spurious. I'm not blaming you for that, but this is kind of the propaganda of psychiatry. I'll read it out to you, Jeff. What does Mr. Schaler believe is the best way to change pathological thought patterns then? Meditation, something physical?
Well, okay, that's a very good question. First off, I question the word pathological. Basically, I think what he means is that he's not talking about a disease thought. He's talking about an unpleasant thought. And how can you change that? Well, that varies by each person. Sometimes meditation could be very useful. Changing your life in some way could be very useful. Leaving your husband or your wife could help you. There are all kinds of things because everyone is different. So I can't say with any confidence, do this and you'll feel better, because everyone is different. We have to relate to each person as an individual, and that's what needs to be done. The other thing is, and this is where I have, even though I identify with a lot of Buddhism, where they focus on detachment, I think it's a problem masquerading as a quote cure. How do you detach yourself from sitting? By standing up.
Right.
You can't just focus on, I got to stop sitting. I got to stop sitting. I've got to stop this thought pattern. No, you have to do something in addition. You have to do something different.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to be done with unpleasant thoughts. You have to change your behavior in some way. And
Yeah, and I think. Sorry, go on, Jeff. Sorry, I
that's
keep
it.
jumping.
That's basically it.
Well, I think this is a really key point, Jared, and thanks for the donation. And thank you, Ian, and Dave's Waffle House. The thing is, at the heart of this debate is the difference between pathology and behavior. It certainly is for me. I don't know if I've got that right.
Yes.
But I'll use the example of addiction just because I've got experience in that. It's not pathological. It's not a disease in my brain that causes me to. I mean, it's even bizarre to think that there could be some kind of disease in my brain, like cancer or something, that causes me to wake up, get dressed, go out, go and rob 2 shoulders of lamb, go and sell them to someone standing outside Sainsbury's, then bunk the train over to Abbey Wood, then buy the drugs, then go to the pharmacy, then cook it up, then stick it in. What kind of disease could cause all that? It's behavioural, it's not pathological. And so that, Jared, that's why I sort of sat up a bit when you said pathological thought pattern.
Right.
I sort of know what you mean though, but I think that's important. They're coming in thick and fast, Jeff. Keys to
let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Keys to the kingdom. Thank you, mate. Dr. Schaler, you mentioned people being evil.
Right.
What would you put that down to? And thank you for coming on the stream.
Well, thank you, Keys to the Kingdom. I'm a devout atheist, so I don't believe in some religious force that makes people do evil things. I consider evil to be someone who finds meaning in creating suffering in others. And some people find meaning in doing that. And those are what I consider evil people.
Yeah, I felt it was metaphorical when you said it.
Right.
Yeah. Illuminatus has been a member for 39 months. Charlie Sparkles has joined the firm. Anglo's back. Nice one, Anglo. A shrink, therapist. A shrink my brother saw said he was psychotic, maybe due to massive intakes of MDMA, which is a form of amphetamine, as a youth. Thoughts, Doc and Chris. Well, I know plenty of people who took massive intakes of MDMA as a youth, including myself, and I'm not psychotic. But Jeff, what would you make of that?
Well, let's remember that any number of drugs could cause what we refer to as psychosis, which is a failure to assess reality accurately. For example, if you take too much LSD, you may not. It's not a good idea to go out driving because you're not going to perceive the world accurately, and you could harm yourself and others. Those drugs could cause a loss of appreciation for reality. There's no question about that. And perhaps MDMA could do that. I doubt that it would be, well, I don't know. I don't want to comment on a particular individual because I don't know his or her case. But the drugs can cause, just like any number of diseases, real diseases. If you have cancer of the brain, astrocytoma, you may exhibit psychotic symptoms. There's no question about that. And each of the categories of the DSM, anxiety, mood disorders, personality or problems getting along with the world, and thought disorders can all be caused by physiological disease. Do you understand? In other words, if you have a real physiological cancer or disease, as it increases, it may affect your ability to perceive reality accurately. That's different than what we call mental illnesses. And the DSM originally, when it was first created, was very clear. It said, we want you to all to know that we're talking about non-organic disorders. In other words, these are not exhibited by a cancer or some other problem with the body. They even differentiate. Now, when people began to think we can benefit by saying that there's a neurological base, then they suddenly took that out of the DSM. But originally, they differentiated between the two.
Wow.
See, they said if you have cancer, if you have whatever, a real disease, it could affect your thinking. And you might feel depressed because of that. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about changes in behavior that are not identifiable or linked to a physiological process. You see the contradiction here?
Yeah. And they stumbled upon it, and they thought we've got to resolve this contradiction, or we're in a bit of trouble.
That's right. That's right.
What would that have been? DSM-2 or the first one?
The first one and the second. Yeah.
They started writing it.
If someone's interested in this, go to a library and look at the original ones, and you'll see this caveat in the beginning. We want you to understand that we're not talking about organic bases.
Wow. I never knew that.
Yeah.
People, if you know LibGen, all of the DSMs are on it. I mean, here's something incredible. Jeff, I don't know if I got this from you. No, it was James Davis. The DSM-5 was America's #1 best-selling book for something like 6 months. Yeah. And it was being bought by the people who published it to dish out to all their psychiatrists. It was a #1 best-selling book. Yeah. And it's 70 quid a go, the DSM on Amazon. Well, it was when James Davis made that lecture.
You know, there's a saying, cui bono, who benefits from these things? And the pharmaceutical companies benefit from more and more diagnoses and inventions of mental diseases. It's an expanding category all the time, just like you said.
They say that the mental health crisis is because mental illnesses have gone up 4 times in the last 30 years.
Right.
But the DSM has grown 4 times in the last 20 years as they've added more mental illnesses to it. You know,
look, from my point of view, this gives the word crook new meaning. These people are charlatans, and I think that they ought to be called out on that basis. When I have debated forensic psychiatrists who say they can tell who's going to kill somebody.
Well, Jeff, can you explain what a forensic psychiatrist is?
Forensic psychiatrist is one who deals with criminal issues, law and criminal issues. And he tries to ascertain why the person is breaking the law on the basis of a psychiatric diagnosis, right? And I pointed out in a debate that I had with a couple of forensic psychiatrists, I said, now you know scientifically that you cannot tell who is going to harm self or others with a certainty beyond that expected by chance. And they said, yes, you're right. We admit it. And then they went right on to say, but we can tell who's going to kill himself or kill other people. And of course, they're saying that is the way they justify involuntary commitment, depriving the person of liberty. You see, these two concepts of liberty and responsibility are like 2 sides of the same coin. You can't decrease liberty without decreasing responsibility. You can't decrease responsibility without limiting a person's freedom. When you start saying the person has a mental illness, you're saying he's no longer responsible for his behavior. These are all variations on the insanity defense, and you're going to take away his freedom as a result.
Yeah. Jeff, have you ever you've been at this decades. Have you ever spoken to a colleague or a psychiatrist of some stripe, and you know they know your work or they know you, and you've seen they won't admit that they know you're right, but you've kind of seen a slight change in expression, and you thought, you know what I'm talking about, and they refuse to if as long as they don't say it, it's not true.
Right.
You've encountered that, have you?
Absolutely. It's been
Wow.
interesting. When I was a professor at American University, I always encouraged students to challenge and disagree with me in class. And one student, I taught in a department called Justice, Law, and Society. I deliberately chose not to teach in a psychology department because I knew they were going to give me a hard time. So I had psychology majors in class with me because they wanted to learn a different point of view. And this one student who argued with me in class, which I always encouraged, said to me, "Professor, this other professor in the psych department said that you're crazy." And I said, "Well, that's not surprising. What did you say to that professor?" And she said, I stood up and I said, "Sir, you may not agree with Professor Schaler, but he is not crazy. He is not crazy." Now, that's coming from a student who disagreed with some of the ideas that she learned in class. But there's a tendency for people on the other side to engage in what we call an ad hominem argument. In other words, they attack one's character instead of the ideas. And I pointed that out in a debate I had down in Charleston, South Carolina, years ago. I said, "Why is it when you're losing the argument with me, you immediately resort to diagnosing me?" You see, that's where diagnosis is a weapon. That's the way they harm people.
Incredible.
And I'll tell you what bothered me. I'm happy to disagree with many of these people, but some of them wouldn't even shake hands with me after the debate. That's how intense they felt.
Well, their jobs are on the line, Jeff. You know.
Well, exactly, and that's why I say cui bono. Who benefits here?
There you go.
It always comes down to it comes down not only to money, Chris, but it comes down to power over other people.
And also, I think what's important is you're also questioning their belief system.
Yes.
And that's so caught up with someone's identity.
Right.
It's a hard thing to have your identity questioned in that way, because you're going to have to rebuild your life. I mean, I find those things beautiful. I used to be a communist. I was a member of the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party of Great Britain. Right. And one of the best things that ever happened to me was having an argument with someone who wasn't a communist, but who used to be.
Right.
And he absolutely pulled the rug out. And the next sort of 6 months were just wonderful. I grew, I learned, and I'd been holding on to this nonsense for years. And I kind of knew it was, but the thought of what it would do, people knew me as a communist. And I'd even say, "No, I'm not a communist. I'm a Marxist."
Right.
And actually letting go of it. It's weird. You let go of something and you actually grow. Jeff, I'm flying all over the place here because I know we're pushed for time. Isn't it interesting? But is Barclay in the chat? I want someone. There's a few more super chats, so I haven't missed them. But is Barclay here? Because this is in relation to something. I want Barclay to talk to Jeff about. And if Barclay is here, he said, "Come on." He's a lovely lad. He's a young lad, a good friend of mine. But have you noticed, Jeff, that on social media these days, they'll have their Ukraine flag, they'll have their trans flags, all the things they support, and they're welcome to support whatever they want. But then they have their mental illnesses. It'll say autistic, and it will say ADHD, autistic. And this isn't one or two. You'll see this. If you go to Twitter, look at 50 profiles, you'll find 10 that have got their mental illnesses in their bio. Right. Now, you don't see real diseases. You don't see someone's. It doesn't say emphysema, cancer. Right. And it's like a badge of honor among the younger generation now to have a mental illness. And I think it's because they want to be special and different. And the problem is they already are by virtue of being a human. You don't need to have bought this nonsense. You are a human. You're the product of a man and woman. You are special. You are different. You don't need to have ADHD. Like this lad Barkley, he told me today that he would be here. He said he might be a bit late, but I think he might have bottled it, and I can understand that. But he said to me the other day, and I don't really want to say this with him not being here, but I'm sure he won't mind. I said, "Were you diagnosed with ADHD?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, you haven't got an ADHD diagnosis." And he said, "No, but the doctor did say I've probably got it." I said, "So you were diagnosed?" And he went, "No, he didn't. It wasn't." And I was like, "But why? You haven't got a diagnosis, but you desperately say, it seems to me you want to have it."
Right.
Right. He is a bit fast, and he's got a low concentration span, but that's just who he is. He doesn't need treating.
Exactly. That's exactly. I completely agree. What's interesting to me when I'm asked to talk about ADHD and all of those related disorders is that if they're interested in something, they have no problem concentrating.
Yeah, there you go.
Take a group of teenage boys who are diagnosed with ADHD and show pictures of a naked woman. I guarantee you they'll have no problem at all concentrating on that image. You see, and I think what people don't want to do is focus on how the curriculum in schools is so boring and irrelevant to students' lives. Yeah. And that's why they don't want to concentrate on it. When you give something, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I've interrupted. I'm just so eager here, Jeffrey. Sorry, mate. It's also a feminized education system. The girls do very well. They mature quickly, faster than boys. Boys tend to learn by doing. Girls are great. Their handwriting's perfect. Most of the boys, it's just scroll. And, you know, I would get so bored so quickly. They showed me the equation. I learned how to do it because she just showed me it. And then it was, right, now do the next 50 in the book. Yeah, but I don't need to because you've just showed me. I know how it works.
Right.
And then I'd start smashing things or causing problems. Right. Then I got put out into the corridor. And it's interesting with kids who get these ADHD diagnoses because the first thing that happens is the social services come around. Second thing that happens is the parents feel guilt because the social services have come round. So the parents start giving a little bit more attention to the child. Then the teachers at school have told, oh, he's got a mental illness. You've got to treat him differently. Right. Now he's getting loads of attention. So as a person, he might need a little bit more attention than other kids, but it's not a disease. Exactly. He just needs a little bit more attention. But even before they fill him full of Ritalin and then the shutters come down and he's a clockwork orange, just all that sort of extra attention, they start exhibiting, a better enjoyment of life because they're getting a bit more attention.
Well, you've got your finger right on it, Chris.
But then they give them the Ritalin. And I used to think it was like with like, but I got a friend who studied it and he said, no, he said the reason they give kids who've supposedly got hyperactivity a stimulant, Ritalin, is because they give them so much, it just shuts them down.
Right.
And I find that brutal.
One of my former psychiatric colleagues, he was one of Thomas Zoss's first students. He gave up all of his role as a psychiatrist. He didn't want to prescribe any drugs. He once said to me, most all psychiatric drugs are either stimulants or depressants. They either pick you up or they calm you down in varying degrees. That's it right there.
Yeah. Awful, really. Thank you, Alan. I did make an effort with the cravat and the shirt for Miss Dr. Schaler. Basil Fawlty, I think you two should debate Fraser and Niles Crane. They'll prove psychiatry is a real thing, and they're not just acting. So is that show with that's Fraser, the American TV show, right? Okay, fair play, Basil.
Well, is that? But that's a fictional show.
No, he knows that. He knows that.
He's cracking a joke. I see. Okay, good. Good.
Quadrex, thank you, Quadrex. How important are the first few years of your life? Well, me as a psychoanalyst, not psychotherapist, would say very, very important.
Right.
Jeff,
let me mention, Chris, I'm not a Freudian. I tend to agree with developmental psychologists like Erik Erikson and cognitive psychologists like Piaget and moral developmental psychologists. They don't use the terms disease. They don't use that. They talk about how people develop along normal patterns, and sometimes those get interrupted for any number of reasons. But certainly the early stages of a person's life are very important. For example, if a child experiences life as very threatening, it's going to affect them. If the mother or father doesn't help or protect a child from danger, the child will experience a great deal of anxiety. And of course, that's going to affect his or her life as he grows. There's nothing mysterious about that. That's common sense.
Well, I'm not an orthodox Freudian, but I would say that a lot of people think that a child has to be abused or neglected, but those early years can be traumatic simply in a normal household.
Absolutely.
If you're the elder brother, if you're the first child, you're the center of that family. Everyone who comes to visit, oh, look at little Tommy, lovely. But then mum has another baby, and you're sort of shunted to the side out of necessity. They're not abusing you, they're not neglecting you, but the new baby is the one that's waking up in the middle of the night, and everyone who comes around wants to see the cute little new baby.
Right.
For the older baby, that's traumatic, and so that will have an effect on you as you grow up, and you will have to adjust to that. And you will find, even as like a 3-year-old, you'll develop coping mechanisms. In a healthy household, you'll likely develop healthier coping mechanisms, and in like maybe a fatherless household, a motherless household, an alcoholic household or whatever, you're going to be less able to develop healthy coping mechanisms because you don't have an environment that lends itself to that. So
and if you really want to screw your child up, just take him to a psychiatrist.
It's absolutely true.
I mean, child psychiatry does horrible damage to kids. First of all, you should only see somebody for analysis or therapy, whatever you want to call it, by consent. No one should ever be taken to somebody else and said, here, fix this child. And frankly, when that's happened with parents who've sent their kids to me, can you change his behavior? I say, look, after one meeting, I can tell you the problem is with you. It's not with your child. And then they say, goodbye, thank you very much. They don't want to take responsibility for what they do with their children. And I have a saying, the example set is the lesson learned. And it doesn't matter what parents say to their kids. It's the examples that they set for their kids that has the most influence. And when I've talked about that before a big crowd, they invited me. It's called Tough Love here in the States. They wanted me to help them control their kids and keep them from using drugs and all this. And I talked about how your words are meaningless to them. It's your behavior. If you're going to tell them not to use drugs and you're doing some heavy drinking yourself, your words don't matter at all. It's the example that you set. If you tell your kids, if you tell your kids it's important to feel good about yourself, and that the parent does not feel good about himself or herself, that's the lesson that the kid learns. And if you don't want to take responsibility for that, And this is the final thing that I said to the group before they threw me out. I said, if you don't want to take responsibility, then you're teaching your child to avoid being responsible. And they said, thank you very much, doctor. Get out. They don't want to hear this.
No.
They don't want to hear it.
I've heard plenty of people tell me that they've seen addiction passed down through generations.
Right.
And I say to them, yeah, I'm sure you have. But it's not in the brain.
Right.
It's in the behavior. And you know, I've been to enough rehabs to see people. What was it like when you were growing up? Well, my mum was a junkie. My dad wasn't there. Okay, so you know, anyway, you made the point. Barclay is here. Barclay, I'll put the link in the chat. Please come in, Barclay. Look at Jeff. It's like Father Christmas of the
Go ahead.
He's a lovely lad. I hope he comes on, but he's donated £2, probably to let me know he's here. I'm right here, you tart. You never sent me the link. I've just put it in the chat, Barclay. While he's sorting out his hairdo, I'll read some chats. They're asking a lot of you, Jeff. Hello, Professor. How would you treat a person cooking his brain, overthinking and talking gibberish, didn't sleep for 3 days?
Well, again, I don't treat people, so I can't tell you how I would treat them. I wouldn't work with somebody like that who was brought to me. If he came to me, I'd have to address how he's feeling in the here and now, how he makes contact, and what he could do to create a different experience for himself. For example, he might need to take a rest from too much information coming in. He may need to just do some meditation. He may need to take a walk. There are all kinds of things that he could do to rest himself, but that's not treatment, right? And it has to be done on the basis of volunteer work. In other words, he's got to choose to come to see me, and then I'll talk to him about what he wants to do and how he may be living against himself, that type of thing. I can't come up with one particular way because everybody's different, Hans. That's my point.
Maybe get him to throw away that half-kilo bag of amphetamine sulfate that you've got.
Oh, there you go. That's right.
I know we're talking about you. I've just had a pop-up. Mrs. Me in it.
Okay,
but he'll come in. He said he's coming in. He's got the link. He's a lovely lad. That'll be a good conversation. Mrs. Me in it, another good friend of mine. People call me crazy as a loon and cryptic Claire. You know, Mrs. Me in it. This is a funny thing that Jeff has commented on in the past. I will read the rest of your message, but people do call those people those names, don't we? You're crazy. You're nuts. Right. You're mad. You're a lunatic. Right. You never hear people go, "You've got cancer. You've got." It doesn't happen.
Thank you. Yes.
Anyway, I'm okay with all that. I know myself. All my life has thrown some mad shit at me to cope with. Answers on a postcard, please. See, she is a bit doolally because there's no question there. So, so you're not going to get too many postcards, Claire, but always a pleasure, love. You can try again if you want. She's lovely.
Well, it depends. I think it depends a bit on what you're doing and what you're saying. I've told some of my friends, if psychiatrists are agreeing with you, you're probably doing something wrong.
Jeff, how many people are there in the what would you call your sphere? I keep saying anti-psychiatry, but
I'm not. But I do take exception to that, Chris, because I think that people should be free to see a psychiatrist or a witch doctor or anybody that they want to. A homeopathic physician, I don't care about that. They should be free to do what they want, as long as they don't harm someone else in the process. That's my caveat.
And as long as they've consented to it.
Exactly. That's the whole thing.
But you have attacked theoretically the principles of psychiatry. Exactly. I think what I'm asking is, I mean, as far as I know, it's you, Thomas Saz, and Jonathan Davis. I mean, is it a big movement or?
There are quite a few people in the States and in Europe. I'm not connected with them. I kind of work on my own, but they invite me to speak at their organizations. But I don't feel comfortable saying this group or that group, because what I've found is that sometimes they're inconsistent in some of their messages. For example, they say there's no such thing as mental illness, and they're opposed to involuntary commitment, but then they say that they're not responsible for their work. They can't hold a job because they're too depressed, so they should be excused for that type of thing. And I've disagreed with them on things like that. But there are a lot of people that are waking up to the fraud that masquerades as psychiatry. It's happening.
Okay.
But
Good.
the thing is that I'm not opposed to all psychiatry. It's just involuntary psychiatry. I think that, if you're going to present yourself as based in science, then it's fair game to be attacked. That's the way all science proceeds.
Agreed.
You have to go through a critical examination. And psychiatrists are too sensitive. They just don't know. They don't like to get examined under the microscope. And
yeah, but Jeff, when you go in with there's no such thing as mental illness, you can understand why psychiatrists might get a little bit skittish with you.
oh yeah, absolutely. I'm used to that. Sure. But
Right,
they
this is
know I'm
Barclay.
correct. They know I'm correct. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, they do know you're correct. This is my friend Barclay. He hasn't got as much light on his face as he
I
usually
can
has.
see him. Hi, Barclay.
He's a lovely lad.
All right.
So Barclay, we've talked about this a lot recently. Barclay, Jeff Barclay.
Hi.
So Barclay, tell Jeff your mental illnesses. Tell him what you told me.
Hi, Barclay. Go ahead.
All right.
Go
All
ahead.
right. I'm going to get this out of the way right now.
All right.
I've paid my Wi-Fi bill. Not working. The platform doesn't work on my computer or my phone. I'm on mobile data. People are going to freeze constantly. I'm probably going to disconnect very fast, and it's probably not going to be secure.
I can't.
Can you? Yeah, you're
Hello?
breaking
Can you hear me?
up. Yeah. Why don't you turn your camera off and just go?
Yeah, my
audio
Wi-Fi is dead. My Wi-Fi is done. It's not. This isn't going to work.
He's bottled it. Look, he's used the Wi-Fi excuse. Barclay, just turn your camera off.
The image is frozen. Your image is frozen, Barclay.
Yeah, for me too.
Such a prick.
Right, you're back. You're back. So your Wi-Fi is working. Barclay, turn the camera off. It will use less bandwidth. Look, he doesn't want to. Look, he doesn't.
Oh,
right, Barclay.
Yeah, let's get a question here. I can't quite get what he's asking.
All right, I think you might have solved it there. Let me just close look at all the.
I can't believe 7 years you've been coming. This stream's been running, Barclay, and your Wi-Fi's never died before. Listen to Jeff laughing. Barclay? Oh gosh, that's.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was so looking forward to something from
No,
him.
it would have been a really good chat, and no one else has come on. And actually, while we're waiting for him, James, that's a great call.
Okay.
Jeff, do you know the sunken cost fallacy?
No, I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with that term.
The sunken cost fallacy is where you've put. It's usually used regarding money. So let me give you an example. You've spent money to take the family on holiday.
Right.
The aeroplane's awful. You get there, the hotel's awful. But because you've paid for the flight and because you've paid for the hotel, no, come on, let's try and make this holiday work. And then the first day out is awful. The bars are awful. The people, but because you've spent money, you keep spending on it because you've already rather than just say, right, let's go home. Because you've already invested in it, you continue to. And I think James has said that in reference to what we were talking about with psychiatrists who you said, they know you're right, but they refused because it's like a lifetime of the sunken cost fallacy. They've done their degree. Yeah, it makes sense in that context.
Well, there was a very important book and study done by Fessinger, and I forgot the other guy's name, but it was called when prophecy fails, and it was about people who predicted the end of the world, right? These were cults, and they had a leader, and they gathered in a cave, and they stored everything in there for the end of the world. And then when the end of the world allegedly came, the world did not end, right? Now, you would think that people's confidence in their leader would be gone at that point. But because they had invested so much in believing that the leader was correct, they changed their beliefs to adjust to this bad news. That's called cognitive dissonance. In other words, they said things like, wait a minute, God is testing us, or the Lord works in mysterious ways. And so what the weird thing is, Chris, is that their faith was strengthened through what should have been the very opposite reaction. Right?
Yeah, there you go. That's
what's happened. But that's exactly what's happened with psychiatry. You see, they know that this biological basis of mental illness, and let me mention too that mental illness is a myth, and so is mental health. What the hell is mental health, right?
Same
thing. But when they have made a big investment in school and money, they don't want to be disappointed. And once they realize they've made a big mistake, you would think that they'd change their ways, but no, they tend to believe more strongly in it. It's the same type of thing. Cognitive dissonance.
That's an amazing one. Andy Mack, thank you, mate. Andy says, my attention was never focused, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And there you go. That's right. How you get through life. You are you.
Right. Yes.
Brad James, he's been quite opposed to some of the things you've said, but why does poprophiria? I think that's some kind of skin condition.
I don't know a lot of this stuff, but I'll go ahead.
Affect the stomach and the mental state of a person. Why is serotonin produced mainly in the gut? I don't think that these are questions.
But these are physiological, biochemical, neurological questions. That's not my area of expertise. My area is behavior, and I don't know. This is not my area, so he probably knows more about it than I do.
Yeah, Brad, you believe in mental illness, don't you? Think that mental illness exists? We've had better conversations than that. That was a weird one for you to come out with. I appreciate the donation, but I was hoping, Mrs. Me in it, I'm kicking you because I want Barclay to try and get back on, and you haven't claimed to have a mental illness, so there's no conversation there at the moment. So that doesn't make sense. Right, Anglo's come back. Thank you, Anglo. It doesn't compute for me, both of you. My brother has been sectioned. So his brother has been sent to mental health places many times, and his auntie died in a mental institute. Anglo, I'll go first on this one.
All right.
So they've been diagnosed as having a mental illness by a psychiatrist,
right?
And they've gone to a psych ward, and your auntie was put in one and she died in there. I'm not quite sure what the question is.
Exactly.
You know, these people are amazing. This bloke, Jack, you absolute savior. This bloke this is one up from Barclay, actually. Anglo, Jack, can I just deal with Anglo because he's made a lot of donations. Jack, Anglo, I'm not saying, and I don't like to speak for Jeff, but I know this. Psychiatrists will section people. They will put people in mental institutes.
Right.
Now, they're not. I'll talk for myself. I'm not saying that the people you're talking about didn't have problems. I'm not saying they didn't suffer. I'm not saying they weren't suffering. But for me, because the mind is an abstraction, the mind isn't the brain. The brain, you can cut my head open and you'll find a huge, really well-functioning brain in there that you can hold. But the mind isn't like that. The mind... You know, a mental illness is like putting a Band-Aid on a dream.
There you go. Very
You're
good.
confusing realities.
Oh, I like that. That's very good. Absolutely. There's no such thing as the mind. What we mean by mind mainly is minding. Mind as a verb, not as a noun. Mind what I'm saying, right?
Yep, that makes sense.
But there is you can't lose your mind. What does it mean to lose your mind? It means you're having trouble thinking and figuring out what's what, all of that. But you can't actually lose your mind, just like you can't find your mind, can you?
Or have one. But
Exactly.
Anglo, I think this is important to say, because I am not interested in this field because I hate psychiatrists. I'm not interested in this field because I hate people who say they've got mental illnesses. I'm interested in this field because I think if you can diagnose someone with something that isn't invented, that's just like doesn't make sense, like psychiatry, the likelihood you'll be able to help them better. If it's a behavioral problem, you can start doing work with them. But if you just palm it off and say they've got a mental illness, they're going to get drugged up. At best, they're going to get drugged up. At worst, they're going to get psyched off, and you probably won't see them again. And when you do, they'll just be, and that's going to add to their behavioural problems. Right. And not in every case, obviously, but I'd suggest in a lot of cases, if you've got someone who's already got behavioural problems and you start messing around with their dopamine, their serotonin, and what have you, this angle doesn't come from a place of malice. It comes from a place of wanting to help people in a better way. And I think psychiatry is going backwards. Psychiatry for me is like the Salem witch hunts.
Right.
That's going back to the Middle Ages. Jack, what an absolute pleasure. You said you couldn't make it and you have come on. Would you like to tell Jeff a little bit about your story? And I'd be interested.
Of course. Can you hear me? Or can you both
Yes.
hear me okay?
Hi, Jack. Yes, go ahead.
First of all, Jeff, if you don't mind me calling you Jeff, Professor,
No,
I've been
it's fine.
watching from the beginning, and I found this talk absolutely fascinating, riveting stuff, and it's made me think about a lot of things. So thank you for that. So this sort of stemmed from me coming on the Dangerous channel. I think it was this time last week, wasn't it? A Tuesday. And I basically did like a takeover stream, and it sort of all went west when we started talking about certain subjects, and then Danger got involved, and it just went on from there. And it got on to sort of mental health, and he was talking about getting you on really soon and the myth of mental health and everything. And I thought I had to say something because I suffered from, sorry, my doggo's here. She wants to say hello.
I've got mine right here too.
Yeah, I suffered from issues starting around about the age of 11. Now, I did explain briefly that I thought that I had a really good childhood. I had a really stable, strong family, positive male role model, positive female role model, older half brothers and sisters that were around, loads of aunties, loads of cousins, big extended family, a brother 3 years younger than me that was from the same parents and grew up like that. Dangerfield said I might have had did you say something about overbearing? But I couldn't relate to that.
No, I just suggested that people often tell me they had a perfect childhood, and they say, my mum, I was the star of my mum's eye and all that. And sometimes you can have an overbearing parent that looks from the outside looks like I wasn't suggesting you were in that situation.
Yeah, no, I was.
But my mother,
I had to do things right. I couldn't get away. I wasn't allowed to get away with stuff. But anyway, see, starting around about the age of 11, Professor, I started experiencing what we know as sort of panic attack, the symptoms of like a panic attack or anxiety attack.
Yes.
So my heart would start pounding,
Right.
my sweaty palms, mouth would go dry, impending feeling of doom, but I don't know why.
Right. I know what that is.
This carried on and off from the ages of 11 to 18. And then at 18, because I don't know if the law's changed since then, I was prescribed an SSRI in the form of paroxetine.
Right.
I didn't know anything about SSRIs. I never read the the pamphlet at 18. Wasn't interested. It was just like, here's a tablet, take this, and in 2 weeks you're going to start to feel better. And I did start to feel better, and I started to gain control of my life again. The panic attacks subsided. Don't get me wrong; I had moments, but since the age of 18, I never had those formative years, as say from like 13 to 18, where I was out drinking, smoking a bit of dope, because I was sort of mainly confined to my house and a very local area because I didn't want to be far from my house.
Right.
So I don't know. Do you think, like, because I'm very interested to know. I don't have a closed mind on it. I don't say, oh yeah, I had a mental illness.
Right.
But I would like to know maybe.
Well, hang on, Jack.
Jack,
Jack, the interesting part for me, and the thing I think you need to also mention is you're still on SSRIs.
Yes, I'm still on SSRIs from the age of 18. Yeah.
And so what's that?
I'm 42 now.
So that's, you've been on them for a long time. So the majority of the majority of your adult life, you've had you've had serotonin being selectively reuptaken, which will by definition will have changed who you are. And you smoke dope 24 hours a day.
No, not 24 hours a day. We talked about this. I have about a 2 or 3 hour window an evening. But you say that counts as
every day.
Yes, yes, I do.
Well,
that started around about the age of 25.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well,
and then could I just say, we talked about me coming off them. Do you remember we had that chat? So as Dangerfield and everyone in the chat knows, I'm an ex-heroin addict as well. I was on heroin for 6 years. It kind of started after my dad died, and it really spiraled. Right. And then I ended up on the methadone program, and Dangerfield talked about you with the methadone earlier. So I was on 60 mgs a day at the highest for about a year. And I moved down to Devon at the start of the lockdown, and I just realized I didn't want to be a slave to this stuff anymore.
Right.
It was, having to do your pickups and, the embarrassing part of the early days where you have to go in your little room and everyone knows why you're going in there.
Right.
I was down in Devon. The sun was shining. Everyone was on lockdown. It was happy days. And I started to come off the methadone 1 mil a week, and I did it over time. And when I got down to like 3 mil, and I was like getting it in my mouth, that was just it. I threw it away. I'm done. I'm finished with that. And I haven't touched any hardcore opiates since then. Right. At the time, I was powerlifting. I was eating clean, and I thought, right, I'm going to come off everything. So I started to taper with the doctor's advice. I think it was 5 milligrams I came down, and I was going to step down like that. But even at the 5 milligram, I was getting like the electric feeling of like an electric shock in my head, like a zap, which I know is a well-known symptom of coming off of SSRIs. And and then things went wrong as they often do in life. And I never carried on with that journey. I felt I still needed them because I ended up in a bad place again. But so anyway, I'm over now. I'd like to hear your thoughts, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I need to say something because I forget what I wanted to say.
Sorry, buddy.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. There are a couple things. Keep in mind that you may have very good reason to be frightened. I don't know what you're sensing in the world, but there's a lot of scary stuff in the world. And I think people tend to discount that. The second thing is that any drug can have an effect on the way you feel. We just make decisions about what are good and bad drugs. But marijuana used to be considered what we call a panapathogen. In other words, it was a gateway drug that caused all kinds of problems. And now things have changed so that people consider it a panacea. It cures all kinds of problems. To me, both are incorrect. It's all a matter of how you use it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a drug that you want to take to change the way you feel, whether that's a gin and tonic, whether it's some kind of sedative, whatever. We all do that in varying ways. We just have what are considered socially acceptable and socially unacceptable drugs. So ultimately, what I do with people who want to work with me is look at the core reasons why they feel so scared. And that's pretty hard. You know, it used to be when people went into analysis, it was considered a very difficult process of self-examination. Today, people have very little patience for working hard on themselves. And for myself and with the people I work with, we take a look at what is it that you are so frightened of? And I mean really an honest look. And that to me is not necessarily an indication that there's something wrong with you. It may be an indication there's something right with you. The world to me is a very scary place. And we have to learn to cope with it in order to function. That's the thing. Now, if you can function with a drug, no problem. If you can function without a drug, my own values are that you'll probably be better off if you can do it without the drug. But I'm not going to interfere with your decision to take the drug. Now, this brings me to the next thing I wanted to mention, and that is with this whole discussion of mental illness, we've got to take a look at the role of the state in the individual's life. And that's why Tom Zoss created the term the therapeutic state, which has come to replace the theocratic state. At least, and that's true in England, it's true here, it's true throughout the world. I mean, when I was an expert witness in an important case in London, and I was just amazed that the courtroom was like being in a cathedral. It was like being in a church, you know?
Yeah, they're very beautiful, the architecture.
It is, but I couldn't get away from the idea that it had a religious connotation. In this country, the theocratic state, where church and state were united, has evolved and been replaced by what we call the therapeutic state. And that's where medicine and state are united, and particularly psychiatry and the state. Now, what I want to do is get rid of that. And some of my colleagues and Tom Zoss, we want to interrupt that whole process, because that's where people's freedom is denied, and that's where responsibility is undermined in all kinds of ways. And I think that psychiatry is very dangerous. So, Chris, I don't like the term anti-psychiatry, because I think if people want to believe in this nonsense, go ahead. You should be able to do it. It's like a religious belief. So I don't want to ban it. Some people who are very critical want to prohibit it. They want to prohibit it. I'm not saying that you're saying that. I'm just sensitive to the term.
Sure.
So, you know, I'm not anti-psychiatry. I'm anti-coercion. Yeah, and that's what Tom was. The psychiatrists need to get out of the goddamn courtroom. That's what we need to do. They have no business there. And when I say that, I mean that they should not be involved in what you call sectioning. They have no right to do that. If you want to go into a mental hospital, go ahead. But most people don't like it. And the state has no business empowering psychiatrists to do that, or psychologists, or over here, social workers end up being able to do that, which is just incredible to me. But
Jack,
go ahead.
Jack, sorry, Jack. If you had a 12-year-old child,
well, I had one. She's going to be 17 this year.
I didn't want to talk about an actual child because.
Oh, okay, a metaphorical child, right? Okay.
Yeah, and there was some behaviour. They were having panic attacks. I think we could call them. You know, and I think a lot of people panic at different levels at different times in their life, and a psychiatrist said, well, we can put a stop to this. We can try some different drugs, and they probably will stop panicking. Now, if a doctor said that to me, a psychiatrist said that to me, I'd say, whoa. What about, why is this happening? Why are they going like that? Because as soon as you give my child drugs, you're shutting the door to me finding out why he or she is having these panic attacks, because you're getting rid of you're getting rid of the things that I can start. You know, I can't then have a conversation with my child and say, you know, what's going on, because they've got artificial chemical adjustments going on in their brain. And then, and also, Jack, last thing, because it's all connected, but I'll give you a long time to reply. And then, so they're 12 years old, then they're 18, and they're still on the SSRIs. Then they're 30, they're still on them. Then they end up on heroin. Then they end up on methadone. Would you want that for your child?
Absolutely not. But in my case, there was 7 years where they were trying to work out what was causing it, right? With a little bit of counselling, and they tried beta blockers at one point to like slow my heart rate down to try and stop the anxiety, but they just gave me incredible chest pain, so that was out. So there was a long period of time they were trying to work out what was wrong with me.
Jack, was there any sustained psychotherapy where you had a couple of hours, a couple of times a week, where you built a relationship with someone? No, because they won't fund it. Exactly.
No.
Like, as soon as you say to me they tried beta blockers, I bet they were throwing all sorts of drugs at you.
No. Just beta blockers, and then when I was 18, it was the Ciroxat, right? But the thing is, I completely agree with how it's changed. We overprescribe, because now a man can go into a doctor's surgery, and within 10 minutes of telling his GP he's feeling a bit blue, will be given SSRIs.
Right.
And that's the interaction. And then there's no money in a cure, remember?
Right.
Would you like to come off of them?
I would like to come off of them,
Why?
yes. This is what I'm worried about now.
Jack,
I know how bad I'm going to feel.
Sorry. Why would you like to come off of them?
Because I think I've got a good control of my life. I'm in a good place. You know my story. I've been here in Ireland 2 years now.
But if you're in a good place and you've got control of your life, why would you want to come off them? It sounds like it's all hunky-dory.
Well, exactly. That's the paradox, isn't it?
Right.
You know. So that's a good thought exercise, really.
Right.
Well, go on, exercise it now.
Yeah. Well, like, is it worth rocking that boat if? I'm taking 20 milligrams. It's not a mega dose. I'm taking 20 milligrams a day.
It's enough to have an effect, though.
Of course it is. Anything is. 1 milligram would have an effect, I'm sure. Obviously, it wouldn't be as noticeable, but if you put any substance in your body, it's going to have some sort of effect, whether you notice it or not.
Good. Right. I agree with you, Jack. Yeah. I think
so.
That,
Yeah. I mean, it's about like, would I rock the boat? Perhaps not. Maybe not, Chris. At this juncture, I'm 42 now.
Right.
Because I feel that the problem is, originally, though SSRIs were meant for a short term. It was a short term. You're in trouble. Here we go. And then people have been on them decades. And getting off them after you've been on them decades is a nightmare.
It's a horrific withdrawal.
Yeah, so they've now I would suggest that, okay, it sorted out something that you had in your teen years, but it's also denied you an element of your true persona, who you are. Because, and that might be all right. You might be all right with that. That might be fine, but it's much like Brave New World. In Brave New World, if ever there's any negative feelings, they have Soma. Get the Soma.
Yeah. And that's it. That's if you're feeling too happy or too sad. It does everything, doesn't it?
Exactly. And I'm not judging. You know my history of self-medication.
The thing is, right? We live in an over-prescribing nation, right? Because it's so much easier. There's no funding for people to be able to talk to people. It's just, there you go, a box of pills. And then again, you've got a customer for life. And
well, you see, Jack, I completely agree with you. In the United States, I'm sure it's the same in England.
Yeah.
Drugs are us. If you're not on what we call over-the-counter drugs, which you take without a prescription, you're on a prescription drug or you're on an illegal drug. It's And the other thing is the pharmaceutical companies have an incredible financial investment in making sure that people stay on drugs. They are making fortunes on this.
Especially in your country, Professor, where it's the media, the advertising, right. And you're one of only 2 countries in the world that can advertise prescription drugs on the telly.
It's also amazing to me when I watch the news, which I confess I'm addicted to because of this idiot Trump that we have here. But
we love him around here.
Oh, well, now I forgot what I was going to say. What's amazing is how the newscasters are making diagnoses all the time.
Yeah.
They say, well, this person's having an existential experience, or he's got narcissism, or he's projecting. And I'm thinking, where do they get these terms? I mean, they're all psychiatrically based. I don't think many of them really understand what they're saying, but it just is amusing to me how much it's become a part of our language today. Diagnoses and drugs. Drugs are us. Diagnoses are us.
Jeff, have you got a copy of the Laplanche and Pontalis Dictionary of Psychoanalysis?
No.
It must be an English thing then. But Jack, did you ever have a BNF?
BNF?
Yeah, I know you would have known what it was. I
don't know what it means.
No.
It's the British National Formulary, but if you don't know
even though I've had the problems that I've had, I've only ever read a few books, and I've never found a self-help book to help me.
I agree.
So,
I agree. One thing I
did a lot of the hard work myself. It was a case of feel the fear and do it anyway, kind of thing.
Well, it sounds
once I got over those things, they just became normal, and
right.
It just all fell into place, and by the age of by the age of 19, this is 1 year after starting the tablets, I'm DJing in clubs in front of crowds.
Right. But Jack,
I couldn't envision doing that a year before.
I just want to put 2 things back to you that you've said to me.
Please do.
1, you wouldn't want that for your own child.
Absolutely
and 2,
not.
If you could stop, would you? You said yes.
Yeah.
So, and that's that weird kind of why? Why wouldn't, if it's worked out for you?
It would be the last resort for my child. I would try everything else. And would I have the hindsight that I've got now with this child, or would I be an NPC and not know anything?
But if it's helped you and it's worked like you just said a year after,
because I don't think it's for everyone.
Right.
I think I'm an outlier with an SSRI. I think most people are taking them, and it's just a crutch. I still think they're suffering.
Right. I agree with you.
But it really did.
If I could go back to what you sound as though you're worried about getting off them, and
only because I'm at a nice status quo of my life. Sorry, right. Jeffrey, I'm talking over you. Apologize.
But if you were working with me by choice, and I sensed that you wanted to find out what it was like getting off them, I'd take a look at what you're so afraid of and whether you can handle it. We call it catastrophic expectations. It sounds like you have catastrophic expectations that things are going to get really scary for you if you get off the drug. And you might discover, if you have some support from somebody like me or a good analyst therapist, that you can handle much more than what you believe you can handle. And you might experience a whole new perspective on yourself and life. I guarantee you, though, if you get off those drugs, you will have an altered state of consciousness. You will view yourself and the world differently. And when I was at Woodstock, and as a teenager, I was dropping dropping LSD and all that stuff.
Oh, Jeffrey,
but I did it. I only did it for like 3 or 4 years. But when I decided to stop, part of what was so intriguing to me was that being straight was an altered state of consciousness that I found very exciting. And I studied meditation with a teacher in India, and I worked with some very good philosophers and analysts. And I realized that my experience of the world and myself off the drugs was very exciting. And I could control my experience much more than I realized I could. And that was exciting for me too.
And I just want to add to that, Jack, that one of the many issues I've got with any of those mood regulating drugs is there's always a sacrifice. You may have stopped the fear,
Right.
but there tends to be a reduction in joy as well.
There's always a price that you're going to pay. Exactly.
That's it. You always have to pay the piper. So your life, that they've cut down the fear, but they've also cut down the joy. So you have a more limited experience of life, which has been going on for 30, 40 years. And I think that's why you wouldn't want your child to have it, because you know that really. Because every day you take that tablet and you think, I take this to regulate my mood. And there's no way that it, heroin is got that weirdness about it. Heroin's weird because it's a physical painkiller, but it also kills emotional pain, but it also kills the joy. Junkies don't walk around going, life's great now, I've killed the pain. They're like,
you can't. Pink Floyd couldn't have put it better with Comfortably Numb.
There you go. He's quoted Floyd, people. He's quoted Floyd. We got there.
I just want to make a quick wisecrack because it made me laugh. Woodlander put in the chat, he's afraid to come off them because he might become a liberal.
Capital L.
That would be horrible.
But Jeff, what do you make of that? I like you, Jack, and this isn't like some mad calls. I'm gonna keep emailing you. You've got to get off them. If they're working for you and you're happy, it's your choice. But I'm not drinking strong beer. That's a sparkling water, by the way. No worries.
I don't care which one it is. It doesn't matter to me.
I've had an ex-girlfriend who was given an incredible dose of SSRIs. They just kept giving her more. They tried different ones. They tried combining them, all sorts of things. And when they finally cured the problem, which was some kind of obsessional behavior, it was an obsessional behavioral thing, which she knew. She developed it as a child because she had 4 stepdads abuse her, one after the other. And because she then had hateful feelings to him, the stepdads, and her mother for colluding, those hateful feelings, she felt guilt because that was her mother and father. Regardless of the hideous things they'd done to her, she felt guilt because they were her protectors. So she built coping strategies which were ritualizing, where she'd go through these almost sort of blockchain-like solving equations in her head to sort of balance out the hateful thoughts she had. So she knew that's where it come from. And
Chris, I got to take a break for 1 minute. Can I do that?
Of course.
Sorry.
Of course. So when they finally got her on all these SSRIs, her personality she was a different person. She didn't have all the madness, what we call madness, but she didn't have her. It changed her. And I think over a lifespan, not you, but one is sacrificing what defines them as an individual when you're relying on something to regulate your mood. And again, Jack, I say it all the time, I'm not judging you. I mean, I've been a drug addict all my life. I know these problems, but that's what concerns me and the medicals. A healthy society would probably call you up and say, have you thought about coming off these? Come in and have a talk to us. And I know loads of people on Prozac and other variations of SSRIs. They get no contact from the services at all. No, all they do is go and get their
nothing.
Yeah,
nothing.
And
absolutely nothing.
It's sad.
No one ever goes into a doctor's office, says they're feeling a bit miserable, and the doctor goes, have you tried exercising or maybe going for a walk in the forest?
Or I think Jeff's point was good. It's a very simple question. What frightens you? Why? What? Right. And a lot of the time, younger people will take a bit of time to find it. But it only takes a few questions from someone who's seen a lot of these people to suddenly, I had a therapist pull it out of me that Right, I'll say something here that I've never said on this channel. Sometimes if I'm in a public place, not so much the last 5-10 years, but in my mid-30s, I would pretend I was on a special forces operation.
Mm-hmm.
I say for no reason, right? So if I was on the London Underground, I'd pretend that I've got a couple of people on that train. There's going to be some kind of attack. I've got a wire that you can't see because obviously I haven't got one.
Mm-hmm.
And I would sort of do movements so that other people on the train would think, is he some kind of special ops or something? And I told the parent, I'd done all that sort of thing. And I'd look at my phone and I'd be all like this and I'd check the station, check the clock.
If you have a newspaper, with the eyes cut out.
I'm trying to give out signs so that people think I'm not who I am.
Exactly.
Yeah. And this therapist said to me, do you remember, when was the first time you done this sort of thing? And I said, I've done it all my life. And so then they got into this whole thing where my old man could kick off, right? Not violent, never violent. I never saw my dad hit my mother or me or my brother, but he could kick off. If he got done at work or something, he'd come in, he'd slam that door, and you knew he was in a mood. You know, I didn't have any fear that he was going to hit me, but suddenly it was tense.
Right.
And it was then that I would start fantasizing.
Sure. Well, that's how you comforted yourself.
That was my coaching.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I wanted to mention one thing, Jack. Imagine for a moment that you were being given a placebo every day, but you didn't know it. In other words, you go to, this is illegal, but let's say you got your supply of pills and they were blanks. There was nothing in it, but you believed that it was an SSRI or even methadone or heroin or whatever. Do you know that you probably would feel differently the way you do with the actual drug, when in fact it had more to do with what you believed about the drug than anything else?
I'll tell you something, Professor. I used to have these thoughts after a couple of years of being on them, and I was like, maybe they've just given me chalk tablets or blank tablets,
Right.
and I've done this all myself. It was just like they just like gave me something to say, this is going to make you feel better, and because they told me that, I'm better. But they have to keep this up now, so that you know, I used to pretend that to myself.
Well, you see this in my book, Addiction is a Choice. I cite all these studies where, quote, alcoholics were given drinks that they were led to believe had alcohol in it, but it had no alcohol in it. And then given other drinks where they were told there was no alcohol in it, and it had alcohol in it. And what they believed about the drink had more to do with how much they consumed than anything else. In other words, if you're an alcoholic, theoretically, you have what's called loss of control. Once you take a drink or two, you can't stop drinking. But that's been disproven for years. In other words, let's say you're this, quote, alcoholic, and I give you a trick drink, and I say this drink, and I mask the flavor with, whatever, bitters or whatever, right? And I tell you there's alcohol in there, but there's no alcohol. You're going to keep drinking it like it would be alcohol. In other words, don't underestimate the power of your beliefs. The power of your beliefs in terms of what that SSRI does for you probably has more to do with how you feel and what you do than the actual chemical properties of the drug, is what I'm saying.
So the placebo effect, is that an established scientific thing?
Oh,
because I've
absolutely.
seen so much evidence that it is. So it's a well-known thing, right?
Absolutely. It's not only is it well known, but it's got to be there for the drug to be sold. In other words, the drug has to be shown to be more effective than placebo in order for the drug manufacturer to sell it.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah.
So if you look at the we call it a flyer, an insert for the drug, and it says the drug does this, it has these side effects, all this other stuff. At the bottom of that strip, it's always going to say, what's the effectiveness in relation to placebo? Because look, if there's no difference between that drug and placebo, then the claims that the manufacturer's making are false. And he or she can't do it. The government will prohibit that. It's lying. It's fraud.
I didn't know that they had to do that in America.
Oh, yeah. It's the Food and Drug Administration in the United States. There's a lot of problems with that. But I mean, they have too much power, basically. But that's the bottom line in terms of letting a drug be sold on the market. It has to be shown to be more effective than placebo.
Incredible. Jack, is there anything you want to say or ask before I let you go? Because I've got to get through some super chats.
Yeah, no. Ultimately, thank you so much for listening to me talk, Jeff. And thank you so much for giving Dangerfield the time of chance. This has been an amazing stream. I've been watching the chat. It's fantastic. Chris, thank you so much for inviting me on.
Really, thanks for coming on, man. Easy. It's very personal, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate what you've been saying, Jack. Thanks. It's nice to meet you, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah. Can I contact you for your web? Is it a website
Sure.
I can contact
Sure.
you?
Jack, I'll send you a link, mate. I'll send you a link, Jack.
Yeah, good.
Awesome. Thank you,
All
guys.
right,
I'll go and jump on my TV now. Watch the end of the stream.
All right.
Thank you, people. Thank you for listening. Goodbye. See you
Crush
Sunday.
up those Prozac, Jack, and just get him up your nose. I hit you quicker.
See you guys. See you all Sunday.
A lot of respect for Jack there. That's
I
not
can tell.
easy.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy.
He does his own stream. Right, so we've got some super chats. Anglo, who's asked a lot of questions, he says, excellent stream. Thanks for coming on, Doc. Thank you, Anglo, and thanks for all your donations. Brad is rightly critical of my comments around mental health. He says, I think all of this is still quite young as a field. I think psychiatry is a couple of 100 years old, but I suppose that could be considered young. But what if the mind? But what is the mind if not the consequence of thoughts produced by the brain? Do you know how much I've spent on you, Chris? Here's another 20 quid, Toots. I don't know how much. I don't count it. Once YouTube have had their bit, I always get disappointed. But you are a regular donator, Brad, and you've been saving my skin. All donators have been saving my skin lately. Jeff, what do you make of that? We have to define.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I think he might have meant if. What is the mind if not the consequence of thoughts produced in the brain?
Well, wait a minute. That's a bit of a tautology. If you say the mind is the consequence of thought, thought is mind. You see? So the other thing is you're going to have to tell me what you think mind is if you're going to talk about it as a consequence of the brain. I don't view it that way. As far as I'm concerned, there is no such thing as the mind. There's no such thing.
It's an idea, isn't it?
It refers to consciousness. For example, one famous psychologist said, an unconscious thought is a contradiction. In other words, conscious is thought. So you can't talk about an unconscious thought as motivating behavior. Obviously, we need our brains in order to think and to speak and to solve problems, right? But there's a distinct difference between mind and brain. And I'm not sure what difference it makes to be able to define mind. Philosophers have spent a long time working on this. I think of mind more in terms of what we do and as an integral part of our behavior.
Yeah, for me, it's behavioral.
I mean, we're speaking right now, we're listening, we're talking and interacting, and all of that's a function of our conscious self. It refers to behavior, and that's distinct from the physical body. But let's remember, it doesn't make sense to talk about a mind without a body. That would be a ghost, a spirit. right? And I don't believe in ghosts. And if we talk about a body without a mind, well, that's a dead body, isn't it? See, this whole question of mind and body has been plaguing philosophers for a long, long time.
I think from Descartes, the whole division
Exactly.
of mind and body, it's corrupted Western metaphysics, and they're still on about it. I mean, Derrida give it a good pop.
Well,
but
one important British philosopher was Gilbert Ryle, Ryle, who talked about category errors. And that has a lot to do with what Thomas Szasz wrote about, because you can't use the same language for non-physical things that we do for physical things. And, if you talk about mind and or thoughts as if they're concrete things, they are not. They're not.
Trying to suggest you can treat the mind is like saying you can treat a thought.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, I've had a thought. Well, I've had a thought and I don't like it. Have you got a plaster?
Right.
Well, where's the thought? Where is it? I think it was Lacan, French psychoanalyst.
Oh God, he was one crazy son of a bitch. Sorry.
No, one day me and you are going to have this out when you just talk about unconscious thoughts. But Lacan said language represents thoughts. Language represents thoughts as thoughts represent themselves. There's no middleman there. So you can represent a thought with a word, but you can't. The thought isn't there. That's not a thing.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Don't like Jacques Lacan. I mean, he was.
I think he was. Go ahead.
A charlatan. But yes. Jeff, people are going to speak about you like you're speaking about Lacan.
I don't think so. I don't think so, because I don't think they have any evidence to say that what I'm saying is incorrect.
Let's not I'll tell you what, Jeff. Can I book you in for 6 months and we'll do a Freudian Lacanian stream? That would be I'd love to.
Let's do it. Good. No, we'd have a great time.
People look out for that one, because we will not be agreeing.
You may end up agreeing with me more than you think, Chris.
Oh, shots fired, people. Shots fired. Thank you, Brad. That's lovely. Mrs. Me in it. The only reason I didn't bring you on is because I need questions for Jack, and you'll come on and just tell loads of questions for Jeff, and you'll tell loads of your wonderful stories. But it's not appropriate for this stream, but that's lovely. But she says this: twice in my life, I wanted to end it all. I was rocking. I survived. So don't diss me because you think I don't have a point of view on this. I don't diss you because I'm sure you've got a point of view on this, but I need you to tell me it. If you can tell me it and it's something I can put to Jeff, you can come on. But
could I address that, Chris?
Sure.
I think people have a right to commit suicide.
Likewise.
And I don't think they should be interfered with. In the United States, it's not against the law to try to commit suicide, but you're treated as if you're a criminal. And for example, the police will hold you down and put handcuffs on you and take you to a psychiatric facility, which is just a fancy name for a jail. Okay. And by law now, the time they can hold a person has changed, and it's getting shorter and shorter. And a lot of that has to do with the work that Tom Szasz did, where people were prohibited constitutionally from being held into a psychiatric facility. But why not? I mean, what's wrong with suicide?
I think
I'm talking to your caller, Mrs.
Meehan. She's absolutely lovely. She's absolutely lovely.
But you said I can see what you said. Twice in my life, I wanted to end it all. Well, why didn't you do it?
Yeah, that's a fair point. You can come on and say why you didn't do it, because if you wanted to, why didn't you? So the fact that you didn't makes me think you didn't want to, because it's not difficult. It's not that difficult, is it? You can jump in front of a train and I think 99 times out of 100 it'll probably kill you. Anglo has now gone the other way. Strongly disagree, Chris, and you, Doc. My brother didn't choose to be sectioned.
Well, so Well, wait a minute. I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. If he was sectioned, obviously it was involuntary. I don't think he chose that unless he requested to be put into a mental hospital. But my objection is that he's put into a facility without his consent. And that, I think, is unconstitutional here in the United States. I object to that. But unless he chose to be, it seems like those are contradictory terms. When you talk about being sectioned, isn't it against a person's will?
If you're sectioned, yes, but
Well,
I don't know necessarily whether Anglo means it.
If that's what that means, then he didn't choose it, right?
And then he says med stabilized him. But here's the problem, Ango. Like Jeff said, if you don't choose to go to a mental home, a mental hospital, a psych ward, whatever, you shouldn't go. And here's why I support that. Because as I was talking earlier, the whole mental health area, field, scene, they're looking to normalize people.
Right.
The DSM is a book of how to standardize behavior, and it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner. You can't do that. You've got this disorder. You shouldn't be acting like that. You've got this disorder. And soon more and more people will be going to psych wards. No, you're not towing the line. You're not fitting in. You're different from other people. And although now it might be all right because there's the odd one or two people here, in 20 or 30 years, we'll have more psych wards and prisons because people are acting not normal. Oh, no, you're crazy. You're mad. You've got to go away. I think if you want to go to a psych ward, crack on. If you want to take drugs to help you, crack on. But if you're being told to, it's a thin edge of a really dangerous wedge, a really frightening authoritarian wedge.
Right. I mean, I hope you understand that, Anglo-Saxon, that my objection is that he was coerced. And there's a big difference between choosing versus being coerced. Our objection is what occurs in the name of help that's essentially coercion. That's our objection.
And as I said at the start of the stream, if you might get called up on a murder charge that you had nothing to do with, and you've got an alibi, you're well presented, you can argue your position, everything's good. But then the prosecutor can bring a psychiatrist in, and they can just do that, and that psychiatrist can diagnose you as unfit to speak. He's not well. We found this that he done 5 years ago. We found this that he wrote on the internet 10 years ago. He's not fit. He's not fit to defend himself. He's not fit to and suddenly you're going away for murder because someone else's psychiatrist, and you can't say, hang on a minute, psychiatry is off its head. It doesn't make sense. You don't get to do that. Because psychiatry has established itself in our society as something with authority, more authority than you, and it's weaponized against you. Imagine that. Imagine it happened in the Amber Heard trial. Now, I don't give a shit. Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, do what they wanted. You drink whiskey, take cocaine, it's going to go wrong. Okay. But psychiatrists just come up out of the blue and would just say, nah, she's got this, she's got that, she's got this. And you have to just take that.
Chris, look at the difference with what we consider ethical medical practice. Doctors can't do anything without permission.
Yeah, they can't just turn up at your house and cut your leg off because you've got gangrene in your little toe.
Right. If you're going to have surgery, you have to sign a release. Everything is by consent. And if a doctor does something without your consent, he or she stands to be sued for malpractice.
Yeah, shall do no harm. I think it's important just to say again for people who missed the beginning, and I'm not speaking for Jeff here, although I'm going to guess he agrees. My interest in this isn't saying people don't suffer. I'm not saying people aren't suffering at all. Lots of people really do suffer in the world. Life's hard, and it can break you. It's just that I think that psychiatry in particular is taking treatment down a road that is almost 180 degrees the way it should be going, and we can treat people better. And so this isn't it feels heartless to say some of the things we've said, but you have to think it through. And my agenda for sure is for people who are struggling in life to get better treatment rather than and it's ironic, and I'm using the word deliberately, the crazy world of psychiatry. I think it's
right.
terrifying.
My only objection is the word treatment. I don't know what you mean by treatment. You see, normally when we talk about treatment, we're talking about consent and something that's physical to address a physical problem. So if you're talking about a conversation, which is what all therapy or psychoanalysis is, a form of conversation where a therapist is trying to influence a designated patient or client, and the patient client is trying to influence the therapist. I want you to believe that I can't control myself. They're each using rhetoric or persuasive language to try to influence the other person's feelings and behavior. That's what treatment really consists of. And Tom Zoss wrote a great book called The Myth of Psychotherapy, in which he deconstructs the whole conversation called psychotherapy. It's not that it doesn't occur. That's where people make a mistake. It's not that these abnormal behaviors don't occur. It's why do they occur, and what do we do about it? And when it gets to what do we do about it, it always has to be done on the basis of consent. And that's what's not happening.
Well, I'm not following you with the issue of treatment there.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean when you say treatment. It's not like ordinary treatment for real diseases, is what I'm saying.
No, for sure. What I mean is,
you're not going to have a conversation to try to get rid of your cancer.
No, I'm talking about someone who goes to see they don't know,
therapist or analyst, something like that. Yeah,
and maybe maybe they can't sleep, and they've tried everything, so they give psychotherapy a go, and what they perceive as treatment is maybe start getting some sleep. Right. And that's what I'd mean by treatment in that context. Yeah. I'm going to have a look at Sars's book on I'm not a psychotherapist. I was a trained psychoanalyst, so I get off of that one. Right, a few more super chats because they're building up. Jeff, I know you've been here a long time. Jared, Dr. Schaler, do you believe in this? It's weirdly worded.
I see it. I see what he wrote. Yeah.
There you go.
Well, this is the closest I can come to a sense of soul, and that is that represented by the pronoun I. Whenever we use the word I, the pronoun I, that pronoun represents something that we tend to call soul or mind. That's all I know. I don't think of it as a separate entity. But there is some difference between being alive and being dead. That's for sure. I just lost my German Shepherd, which was a very dear service dog of mine. And when I found her, I heard her fall in the middle of the night, and I found her dead about 50 feet from my bed. And I had a feeling that something left me right then. And I wept very hard, and I felt as though, for lack of a better word, her soul, something that I considered the essence of her life, had left. That's the best I can come to defining soul.
When I first set this stream up, there was a comment. The first comment was someone who doesn't usually come here. It was, "You should be embarrassed, the myth of mental illness." What a ridiculous thing to say. And this person, whose name I don't recognize, "Mental illness isn't real, behave."
I see it. But you see, I don't think this person has been listening to what we've been saying.
No,
what
they
we've
probably
been saying is that, of course, these people exhibit these behaviors that you say are caused by mental illness. We're not denying the existence of these behaviors. What we're saying is that the mind cannot be sick, and that they should be free to behave the way they want to, and that if we call it a disease, we're going to start infringing on the person's responsibility and freedom. That's what's at stake here. But
exactly.
we're not denying the existence of their abnormal behaviors, right?
Or, well, abnormal according to
Right.
certain cultural norms that also should be questioned.
Exactly.
Okay, keys to the queen. Sorry, keys to. I nearly said queendom. How bizarre! What a dare I say Freudian slip. Keys to the queendom. I'm sticking with it. Throughout history, we have tried to understand life and the mind. Always interested. Yeah, it is. It is. And that's why we've had 140 people here from start to finish. Nice one, Keys to the Kingdom. Jared, I'd like to hear this doctor. I'd like to hear this old fella's what he's got to say on COVID jabs. That's another argument.
I'm happy to comment on that. It doesn't matter.
Okay, but we have got to go for it.
I had COVID, and one of my friends who didn't believe in it said, "How do you know?" And I said, "I looked at the results of the test, and it said that I had the virus and the antibodies in my blood, and I felt sick." So on that basis, I agreed that I had it, and I know this is controversial. I had the vaccine. I had several of them. And one of the reasons I had the vaccine was because I was going through treatment for leukemia, and that I had a compromised immune system. And so I ran a higher risk of developing something more serious if I got COVID again. But I think the real controversy is, does a person have the right to refuse vaccine? And I think that go ahead.
He says there specifically the state mandating
Exactly.
Yeah.
I see it right here, and I think that that's an important point. The issue is, do you have a right to expose other people to your contagious disease? That's where it gets controversial. So I'm not sure. I think you have a right to refuse it. Sure.
Yeah. Likewise.
I think we
nice
all.
One, Jared. Jared, I think that's a whole other field. It's a great question, but it's 2.5 hours. And like I said, Jeff is 500 years old, and I'm getting a bit tired. It's been 2.5 hours. You're looking good on it, Jeff. Andy Matt just drops 199. Anglo, and again, excellent guest. Thanks, Doc. We've got a couple of entropies. People think I missed them, but we didn't. Jordan Taylor said, a subject I strongly agree with Chris. Nice one, Jordan. Although, I'm happy for people to agree or disagree. But thank you, Jordan. The Geezer 30 dropped in an Ayrton Senna. He says, hello, chaps. Are either of you aware of the work of Jerry Marzinski? His findings and the nature of what afflicts, specifically paranoid schizophrenics. From his time spent working in US prisons and talking to them about their voices and his conclusions as to what they are and are not. I haven't. I've never heard of Jerry Marzinski.
No, but if I could comment on voices, that's called thinking. We all hear voices, and if you don't hear voices, I suspect you're dead. So there's nothing unusual about hearing voices. It's certainly not characteristic of what's called paranoid schizophrenia or schizophrenia. People make claims, and they say, this voice told me to do X, Y, and Z, as if they don't have the power to resist that, right? Of course, if they hear some monster or a cat or a dog telling them to go and kill somebody, they don't have to do it just because they say that this cat is telling them to do it. You have a right to refuse and say, no, I'm not going to go and kill that person. But some people seem to think, and it takes place in court here all the time, where a person says, I couldn't resist committing the crime because I heard a voice that told me to commit it. Well, that's the mental illness excuse right there. How can you prove they didn't? How could you prove they didn't hear the voice? You know, you can't prove.
What about if someone else told them? What if I said to them, go and kill that person? That they're still hearing a voice. So I quite like the idea of that. No, I heard a voice saying kill them. Well, here's another one. Kill them. Right. Why haven't you? Okay. In fairness, that fella, I assume, or lady, Maranto, has said, I did just arrive, to be fair. So that's fair enough, and that takes some balls to say that. So fair play. This is quite a funny one. Look, we went through this on the second stream. We're all anti-globalists, and Jeff isn't politically aligned with us. So Brick Dictator's trying to cause a bit of grief here. He says,
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, but go ahead.
Well, we're politically different, you and everyone else in this stream. But
I don't know how. I don't see anything. I haven't heard anything I disagree with. So
that's because I deliberately move away from those.
Okay.
and the chat know it as well. But it's a little joke from Brick Dictator, a good friend of mine. He said, respectfully, does Jeff believe there's any cure for Trump derangement syndrome? You don't need to answer that, Jeff. I know where you stand.
I'd love to. Sure. I'll tell you, the cure is to throw his ass in jail. That's what he needs to be. That would be the cure.
I would like that.
That would be the metaphorical cure. No, he's a very dangerous person, and
I would like.
I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned that he's going to become president again. And
Jeff, I would like them to throw him in prison so that he could be president from prison. Anyway, moving on quickly. We've got, I think after I rewatch this, we've got about 5 streams lined up for the next couple of years.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, we are, I think we are done. Jeff, is there anything you would like to leave us with? Anything you want to say about this? I will put some resources this video will go live as soon as it's up, but I will add some resources down below for further reading if anyone's interested. If you could like the stream now, people, then YouTube will send it out to other people and we'll get a couple of thousand views, which would be nice.
Well, I would encourage people to read Thomas Zoss's writings and go to the website that I built that has a lot of very good information. It's szazz.com. I'm going to update that soon. And there's a lot of important information there. You could also go to my website, Schaler, SCHALER.net, and there's a lot of information there. And read it and talk about it and invite people who have this point of view that I've shared with you via Chris to speak to groups of people so that we can talk about it. Unfortunately, the psychiatrists who believe in mental illness like to control the arena for communication, and that's a terrible thing. We need to talk about these issues the way Chris is facilitating here, and I think you're doing a very important job, Chris. I really appreciate it. We need to have more and more of this.
I've put the link to the Zaz.com and the Schaler.net in the chat, people. So if you can click on them, they'll be open in one of your windows. I will put them below as well.
If I could just say that I'm not making any money on either of those websites. I'm doing this all as a public service. Don't think that we're getting rich on this. We're getting poor. If anything, people lose their jobs for supporting Zoss and these ideas, because it undermines the psychiatric establishment, and they get very, very angry about it. And
people, let me tell you, the people who were buying the DSM from Amazon that made it go to the top best-selling book for about 8 months, I can't remember exactly. It was Pfizer, and it was also Pfizer, I think, that done the DSM-3, which was the one where it really took off.
That's an important point, Chris. Very good. Yeah, because again, you've got pharmacy industry behind the scenes here.
Yeah, they're. I mean, I put the link in the other day, that James Davis, where he tells you the whole history of the DSM, and it's mind blowing. And he goes and talks to the bloke. What's his name? Spitzer or something?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. He was a president of the American Psychiatric Association.
Yeah. He goes to his house and he says it's bullshit. He says, no, we just made it up.
That's right.
And he says it. He says, what was the what's the word? What were the I can't think of the word, sorry. It is like 1:30 in the morning here. But, he asked him how they came up with the checklists for the mental illnesses that they kept adding to the DSM. And he said, no, we done a vote. And there was one vote, right? This is a true story. There was one mental illness, another one that they added, and they've quadrupled them in like 30 years. DSM 3 to 5 is quadrupled. Right. He said there was 8 people in the room voting whether this mental illness should go in the DSM, and it was 4 yes, 4 no. They got the tea lady to swing the vote. They said, you've been here listening, would you put this one in? And she was sort of like, okay. The tea lady. This is the DSM is the psychiatrist's Bible. Right. It's a farce, people. It really is. And I think the work Jeff has spent his life doing is incredible. And Jeff changed my life. When I was a heroin addict. I was going to rehab centers. My mum was losing her mind over it. And so I'd go to these places, and they told me God was going to get me clean, and we had to pray. First thing in the morning, you had to pray. And I'm thinking, this is the NHS, the National Health Service. A God is going to stop me using. Right. And it's so confusing because you're like, hang on, I can't leave another rehab place after 3 days. And then, like Jeff said earlier about denial, I'd say to them, but I don't believe in God. And they say, well, that's probably why you're an intravenous drug user. I'll be like, what the fuck? So what? When I believe in God, I won't be. And they'll go, yeah. And I'll be like, oh, for fuck's sake. And I'll tell you what, Jeff, it was as I was leaving a treatment center, one of the staff, and bless them, came up to me as I was leaving, said, listen, there's a book you might be interested in. It's called Addiction is a Choice by Jeffrey Schaler.
Oh, that was nice. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah.
My whole life changed because I just thought, oh, okay, this is more like it. And it was nice to take responsibility.
Sure.
Because then I had, even though I decided to carry on using, I understood what was happening rather than having so-called authority figures telling me just batshit nonsense. Just you've got to.
Let me just say let me say something here, Chris, and that is, why did you feel excited? Why did you feel uplifted? Because the more responsibility you feel, the freer you are.
Exactly.
Responsibility and liberty are two sides of the same coin. That's an important equation, I think. And I learned that. Tom and I used to talk about that all the time. When you diagnose somebody with a mental illness, you're always going to decrease responsibility. And when you decrease responsibility for their behavior, you're going to decrease their experience of liberty.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's why I always pushed for the repeal of all drug prohibition. Now, I think all drugs currently illegal should be on the free market. But what I also would insist on is that people be held responsible for their behaviors. Yeah. So if you're going to take drugs and you hurt somebody else, we should throw the book at you. There should be a consequence.
Yeah. Agreed.
Right.
I can give you an example of what you just said about freedom and responsibility. A perfect example. I got clean using the 12 steps, which God features in 7 of them.
Right.
And I didn't believe it. And they even say it. Fake it till you make it. I had 3 years off of drugs using the 12 steps, right? But I knew I didn't believe it.
Right.
And I felt claustrophobic. And then I started using drugs again. There was a few other things happened. Then I got hold of your book, and I felt freer using heroin, knowing it was my choice, than I felt clean believing something I knew wasn't true. And for me, that is a powerful example of that kind of. I'm just choosing to do it, and so it might not be right. It might not be good for my life, whatever you think. But I suddenly, it was like I breathed for the first time in 10 years. No, it was a life changing.
I'm very happy to hear that. I think that's absolutely what Tom and I asserted for many, many years, that the more responsible, the freer you are.
Yeah.
So, psychiatry enslaves people through these diagnoses. But let me remind people that the objection here is the psychiatrist as an agent of the state. That's the key thing, because if the psychiatrist is not empowered by the state to section people or to declare them not responsible for their behavior, there's always going to be an infringement on civil liberties, always. And that's what we object to. That's the therapeutic state in action right now.
And remember, people, as the state, sorry, I'm just racking up a tune for Anglo. Don't forget, people, as the state gets bigger, that power gets bigger, more people are going to be under the thumb of the likes of psychiatry.
Right.
And this is Brave New World stuff. Jeff, listen, man, you're looking great. You've been a hero of mine since I picked up. As soon as he said to me, the book's called Addiction is a Choice. Even just the title, I got it before I got home. I went and got it. I went around a mate's house, I had a computer, and said, get on that Amazon lark and get me this book. And I just thought, great. It's the third time, like you said, you don't get paid. You actually lose money being a heretic. That's the word, isn't it? Heretic. Sorry.
Yes. Well,
but your favorite heretic.
I love being on your show. I love you, Chris. I'm very happy that we're friends and colleagues, and I'll come back as often as you can handle me. You have a great crowd of listeners and participants, and I really enjoy interacting with them as well. So keep going.
There you go. Anglo said, I finished work early for this. Well worth it. Thank you, Anglo. You've been very kind, very generous, and some interesting questions as well. They're the ones that, we can get our teeth into. JP says, amazing guest. Please come back, Doctor. Yeah.
Happy to. Yeah, thank you. Thank
Anglo
you.
said it again. Andy again. We've done that one. And I've done the entropies. Thank you, Brick Dictator. Thank you, Jordan Taylor. Thank you, The Geezer. And last of all, Jeff, I'll let you go now because I do a little chat with the people at the end. But look after yourself. Don't get on the methadone. I know you've got a taste for it. I know what you're like.
Right. Okay, my friend. Take care.
Yeah, you're looking so well, Jeff. Look after yourself.
Chris. Take care, buddy.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I tell you what, people, I know I get a bit sentimental at the end of streams, like when I'm always telling Packer what it means to me. But, I was a young man and I was lost with all that drug use. And that's really important, what I just said then. I felt freer. See you later, Jeff. I can still see him down there. You're not on the screen. You're all right. But, I can get rid of you if you want. You can do what you want, Jeff. If you turn it off, you're gone. No problem. There, he's gone. But I felt freer. And freedom's important. I don't need to tell you like that. I felt freer when I was using heroin than when I was clean using a system that I didn't trust. Now, don't get me wrong. I love NA. But I love 10% of it. And that's enough. That's the bit I learned to use afterwards. And that's the fellowship. That's the community. I haven't got much time for the 12 steps. There's 2 or 3 of them I have. When I'm wrong, promptly admit it. Regularly take a personal inventory. Pay back debts and all that sort of stuff. But that book changed my life. If I wanted to use drugs, and I still do occasionally, that I've never pretended to be NA clean. I don't blame some ludicrous disease. I'm choosing to do it. And freedom is becoming a commodity that we've got less and less of, and it's really it's our birthright to be free. And this is just the start of, the DSM is on number 5 now, and like I said, from 3 to 5, it's nearly quadrupled. And when you see these newspapers, all mental health, do you know that 1 in 4 Britons has got a mental illness? Apparently, a quarter of Britons have got a mental illness. How many Cambodians do you reckon have got a mental illness? Do you think they know what depression is out here? Do you think they know what Tourette's disease is out here? Do you think they know what oppositional defiance disorder is out here? They haven't got them because they haven't been told they exist. It's a fucking scam, and I tell you, it's dangerous. And I just want to say this. I know I've said it a few times. I know people suffer, and if meds help you, and it's the only way that you can, and it's right for you, and you chose to do that, that's your call. I stuck heroin and crack in a hole in my leg. That was my call. And I also know that it's difficult. You got a family member, and they're running around the house, and they're writing on the walls, and they're hiding all the knives, and it's all kicking off, and the doctors take them away, and the family can fucking relax and get some sleep, and the kids aren't crying every night. Okay. But, that isn't as clear cut as it looks. It's the thin end of a wedge that, like the rest of our society, in the direction the rest of our society is going, to absolute authoritarianism. Because if you're not normal, what is that normal? 100 years ago, you could be this person, and you could go all the way to that end where you barely spoke. It was all right. People are different. But the likes of psychiatry don't do that. To make their money, they need to sell medicine. They need to give people pills for years, decades, lifetimes. So they think, well, hang on a minute. We can move those in a bit. People tell you autism's on a spectrum. Well, all right. So what? This is the top end, and this is the bottom end. So at some point, that spectrum goes from top end, fully autist, to not autistic, and that carries on. But where is that line where you're not autistic? And if it's on a spectrum, it also includes not being autistic. And that tells me it doesn't exist. Let me tell you something else. They took Asperger's out of the DSM. So all those people that got diagnosed with, you've got Asperger's. Well, you haven't anymore. It doesn't exist. Good luck. And I don't laugh like that at you. I'm not laughing at people who've been diagnosed with Asperger's. I laugh at the blatant fucking ridiculousness of the whole thing. I want to thank Jack for coming on. That ain't easy. That's not easy. Talking about things like that are very personal. It's not easy. I want to thank everyone who donated. You've been very generous tonight. I've probably missed a couple. I'm going to play a tune. I'm going to dedicate this to Anglo-Saxon, who asked some very difficult questions there and also shared some stuff about his own experiences in this field. And listen, I love all of you. I love this stream. I love the Scrubs. And hello to anyone new here. I am a writer. Link in the description if you want to read about addiction. Not always addiction. There's the occasional other story. Top link in the... I don't know if I did. It's my Substack. There's about 32 short stories over there. What else? I want to thank my moderators, the boy Cray and the man Rags. Who else do I need to thank? Most of all of the people who come to watch this. I stream 2 or 3 times a week. I try and keep me interesting. Sometimes it's just a chat about anything, but sometimes we hit gold, and Jeff's brilliant. This is a tune called Cold Hard Steel. I dedicate this to Anglo-Saxon. And I want to thank Jeff again for coming on. Look after yourselves, people. There is still time to get that grift going. I'll put your messages on the screen. Here we go, people. Let me know you've got the audio. Come on, you Gunners. UTA. Arsenal play Bayern Munich in 13 minutes. Here we go. There'll be a little bit of silence before it plays because I've racked it up. Ta-da!
Tell your daddy you're fighting good. Feel the glory he said you would. Tell your mama you're coming home. Over all of that deafening drone. But you'll realize you've been sold when you feel the enemy's cold hard steel. Feel the dawn of your final day. Feel the fear and go anyway. Get a ride in that big black plane. Kill your conscience and numb your brain. But you'll realize you've been sold when you feel the enemy's cold hard steel. Cause the wheels already been rolled when you feel the enemy's cold hard steel. Oh Lord. Tell yourself it ain't really you. But when the slaughtering has begun, you'll be murdering someone's son. And you'll realize you've been sold when you feel the enemy's cold hard steel. Cause the wheels already been rolled when you feel the enemy's cold hard steel. Oh Lord. Yes, you'll realize you've been sold when you feel the enemy's cold hard steel. Oh Lord. Cause the wheels already been rolled when you feel the enemy's cold hard steel. Oh Lord. Hey.
Amazing stuff. There you go, people. Look after yourself. Oh, yeah. All right. You can't hear that, can you? So I'm just, yeah, all right. Look after yourselves, one and all. Glass drop. Take care, people. Hoita. Sign up to my Substack. You'll love it. Hoita.